call this meeting of the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services to order. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Robertson is in the chamber. Councillor Louis is on a leave of absence for civic business. Councillor Stevenson is not in the chamber. Councillor Deal. Here. Councillor Jang. Here. Councillor Reimer. Here. Councillor Meggs is in the chair. Councillor Ball is on leave of absence for civic business. Councillor Carr. Here. Councillor Affleck is on a leave of absence. Councillor DeGenova. You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. We'd like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and we're welcoming today a UBC graduate journalism class. Is that right? Future employees of the mainstream media, we hope. They hope. Order. Okay, so today we have a proclamation for International Day for the Eradication of Poverty and a Raise the Rates Food Challenge 2016 to be presented by Mayor Robertson. Mr. Mayor.
How's that? Improved? Okay. So good morning, everyone. The Raise the Rates campaign and the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition have been incredibly strong advocates for the rights of people living on social assistance here in BC, and they're achieving equitable levels of support. So today we're really going to focus on the amazing work that they do, recognize that, and also recognize the day that's happening all over the world right now. The efforts here in BC for a more just and equitable place are very deeply aligned with the City of Vancouver's Healthy City strategy and our commitment to a poverty reduction plan for Vancouver, making sure that we eradicate poverty as we know it here in our city. It's time for a universal recognition that poverty is a key social determinant of health, and we all need to take up the call to raise the rates here in BC. We honor this commitment by proclaiming October 17th, 2016. That's today as International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. It was a couple days ago, and the week as of October 16th to 22nd as Raise the Rates Week here in Vancouver. And I would like to invite two fantastic community advocates to join me to receive this proclamation and say some words. Here we have Trish Garner here, is a community organizer at the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition, is helping to lead Vancouver's poverty reduction efforts. And Bill Hopwood is here, representative of the Raise the Rates campaign. If I could invite them both to come forward and be recognized. And Fraser's here. Fraser Doak is here in Bill's place, so thanks for joining us, and welcome. Thanks for being here. So one other thing I would say is to invite everyone here or anyone tuned in to participate in the town hall that is happening, a panel that's here about the Welfare Food Challenge takers, which include our Councillor Andrea Reimer, is currently on the Welfare Food Challenge, and many others around the city to bring attention to how difficult it is to live on $18 worth of food in a week. And good luck. Mary Claire's on it too, Mary Claire Zach, who is our lead on social policy here at the city as well, and many others as well. So we have a panel happening this Sunday, October the 23rd, here in Council Chamber on the 3rd floor of City Hall, 2 to 4 p.m. And also have a look downstairs in the atrium of City Hall, Making Poverty Visible. There's a flag exhibit currently up right now in the atrium of City Hall that's sharing the message on the impact of poverty on communities around BC and the need for a BC poverty reduction plan, which we don't have, as we'll hear from these two amazing advocates here in our city. So please welcome some words from our two special guests today, Trish Garner and Fraser Dokes. First, Trish, welcome.
Thank you so much. Does it fit? There? Okay, great. Thank you. I would like to thank Mayor Robertson and Council for making this proclamation today, and I would like to thank the city staff who worked behind the scenes to bring this proclamation forward. Now, what does this proclamation actually mean? Well, it is important to mark these days. Monday, October 17th, a couple of days ago, was the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. And it's important to reflect on that for a moment. The eradication, the elimination of poverty. Let's think about that, what that would mean for the 451,000 people living in poverty in BC right now. It is possible to eradicate poverty in BC. And it is important to mark this week as Raise the Rates Week. Let's think for a moment of the 200 people taking the Welfare Food Challenge this week. Some are here with us today. Councillor Reimer, thank you. Mary Claire Zach, thank you so much. But let's reflect and remember those for whom this challenge doesn't end in a few days. The 185,000 people on welfare and disability benefits in BC. The deeply inadequate rates who live this week after week. And I'd like to introduce Fraser Doak, who is on disability benefits and will just speak to the challenges of that reality for a few minutes.
Good day, everyone. And first off, thank you all three forms of government, civic, federal, and provincial, that have taken part in the food challenge. Doing $18 a week is impossible for me as a person with disabilities. I am 30 years HIV positive. I had a liver transplant 3.5 years ago, and now I'm dealing with cancer. I will be going through chemotherapy very soon, and I've been told to drink 2 Ensures a day. That's over $6. Things like that are next to impossible with rate of increases that have not happened in almost a decade. People with disability have had an increase, but then there's been a clawback system on our transportation costs to and from either work, hospitals, or even our family members. Things have become more of a challenge for a lot of the people in BC due to the inactions. I would be handing out some of these posters, and please, people, understand that the people that are participating in the Welfare Food Challenge at the moment are doing it for 1 week. This is a challenge that not only the welfare people have to feed themselves and keep their minds somewhat set. It's really, really hard. They can go to a food bank, they can go to their other places to try and get food, but it is a very big challenge when you have a hard time keeping a roof over your head, food in your belly, and even a few pennies in your pocket, and pennies are not allowed anymore. It is a crime that the government has not increased welfare rates in almost a decade. If any person in here can find a place where you can cook, where you can heat up your food, SROs don't allow fridges or stoves or even hot plates in most of them. So most of the people out there are eating, I hate to say it, junk food, because they don't have the ability to at least do something in their SROs. So when you get depressed from food, you go to other things. I'm going to get drunk because I'm depressed. I'm going to do a bit of drugs. And then it creates into addiction. And then it creates into a homeless situation. And it just snowballs. And people are living on our streets now. People are taking tents instead of SROs. Things are getting really, really hard for the ones that are in need. And I hope everyone understands, as a PWA, I am very, very blessed that I have a roof over my head, food in my belly, and a few pennies in my pocket. And I still have to have a challenge every week just to make sure I eat properly. So I hope everyone understands what welfare is and what Raise the Rates has been doing for the last 5 years. We have been trying to get the word out that things need to be changed, not from just the civics, but from all levels of government for the ones that are in need. I hope you understand.
Thanks so much, Fraser. But this proclamation means more than just thinking about this today for 1 day. It's an expression of ongoing work that the city has committed to through their Healthy City strategy, Recognizing that poverty is a critical determinant of health, the city is committed to reducing poverty and has set targets and timelines. And we're now working with them to develop a plan. And there are two key pieces to this work. First, what can the city do within its jurisdiction? And becoming a living wage employer is a significant step here. And second, how can the city advocate to the provincial government to urge them to share the weight in this and develop a provincial poverty reduction plan? And recent announcements from the city in calling for an increase to welfare rates is a significant step here. Most of the issues facing people in BC and in Vancouver, increasing rent, childcare fees, MSP premiums, food costs, hydro rates, are provincial responsibilities and need action at that level. The cry of unaffordability is thick in the air, but it's really a symptom of a social safety net that is broken and has been pulled out from under our feet. BC has one of the highest poverty rates in Canada, yet we are the only province without a poverty reduction plan. Hard to believe that I still have to say this, but poverty is bad for all of us. Homeless people will die half a lifetime younger. Children are not growing up happy and healthy. We are all impacted. Our health is impacted negatively by living in such an unequal society. And we are losing $8 to $9 billion per year paying for the consequences of poverty. So a poverty reduction plan is a good plan for all of us. So this proclamation today marks one step in this journey, and I'm excited to continue our work with the city in direct policy change and advocacy to the provincial government in calling for a provincial poverty reduction plan. Thank you.
I'm just going to read the proclamation here. Thanks very much, Trish, and thanks, Fraser, for your powerful words and your leadership here in the city. Whereas the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty has been observed throughout the world every day since 1993, and when the United Nations General Assembly designated this day to promote awareness of the need to eradicate poverty. And whereas poverty is a violation of human rights, and the United Nations' new Sustainable Development Goals have the primary goal to, quote, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. And whereas through its Healthy City Strategy, the City of Vancouver is committed to two aspirational targets: reduce the city's poverty rate by 75% and increase the median income by at least 3% every year. And whereas the rate of working poverty in Metro Vancouver is second highest in the country, and in response, the City of Vancouver is adopting the living wage for all its employees and contractors. And whereas the poverty rate in BC continues to be among the highest in Canada, and 1 in 5 children live in poverty in Vancouver and across our province, and whereas income assistance has been frozen at the deeply inadequate level of $610 a month since 2007, and whereas BC is the only province in Canada to not have a poverty reduction strategy with targets and timelines, and whereas the Raise the Rates campaign is holding its annual Welfare Food Challenge from October 16th to 23rd, now therefore I, Gregor Robertson, the Mayor of the City of Vancouver, do hereby proclaim the day of October 17th, 2016, International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, and the week of October 16th to 22nd, Raise the Rates Week in the City of Vancouver. Thanks again for your strong advocacy and everyone for calling more attention to this and putting more pressure on our provincial government to make sure they raise the rates and have a poverty reduction strategy. Thanks again for everything, and look for the posters here as well. You guys want to take this proclamation while we've got you here?
Okay, well, thank you very much. As chair for this meeting, I'm suggesting for reports that have no staff presentations or speakers, we adopt the recommendations collectively in a single motion. There are currently no staff presentations or speakers registered for items 3 and 4. Does any member wish to hold any of these reports for debate, separate vote, or because of a conflict of interest? Not seeing any. We need a motion to adopt the recommendations contained in the reports for 3 and 4. Councillor Deal, all those in favor? Any opposed? Sorry. Oh. Oh, okay. Sorry, I guess we were short one. Okay, so we need a motion to adopt the recommendations. It was moved by Councillor Deal. All those in favor? Did you have a question, Councillor DeJova? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Carter, did you want to hold one of those?
No, actually, Mr. Chair, I would hold number 3, but I really only want to hold it for, if you can give me the leave to just say this, an incredible thanks to the BC Housing and our staff for such an innovative approach to the advanced funding on that project. It's a great project, and I was very impressed by that, but I don't want to hold it just to say that. Okay. So I'm fine about it.
Well, you just
So that an extra endorsement for so you're going to vote twice in favor of that.
I will.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of the reports 3 and 4. Any opposed? Okay. So the following have been approved on consent: modifications to lease terms and other arrangements. Fire Hall number 5, YWCA project. The contract award for the Vancouver South Transfer Station site improvements. So we will now go back to item number 1, presentation on the housing reset. And Ms. Llewellyn-Thomas, you have words for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This morning, we're making 2 presentations about housing. The first is to provide Council with more detail about the housing reset. With senior levels of government taking unprecedented steps to address Vancouver's housing crisis and community members from all income levels and stages of life calling for action, now more than ever, the city needs to look at our 2015 to 2026 housing and homelessness strategy to address the crisis too. The Housing Reset presentation describes the issues and questions we are examining in collaboration with stakeholders, partners, and the community. We're also in the final countdown to Vancouver's Readdress Housing Week and Summit starting this Monday. The week of events coming up includes 8 free public sessions and 2 ticketed events. Topics include the right to adequate housing, renters, real estate, and economic resiliency, a day-long event, and evening session called Millennial Activate, which will examine issues facing younger households and families. That's just a few of the events that are going on that are free for the public to participate in. Overall, the city is hosting with partners 13 events in 10 venues across the city this week, and we're featuring 15 international and national speakers. We expect the scope and reach of Readdress Week and Summit to bring the best ideas together to develop our reset housing strategy, which will be brought to Council in Q1 2017. The second presentation this morning will outline the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy approved by Metro Vancouver in June of this year. The regional strategy sets out 5 goals, and this morning's presentation shows the city's progress to date in meeting them. Also suggests some future actions for us to take. The regional strategy has included population and employment projections to the year 2026 and identifies a need for 12,800 new rental homes in the city in the next 10 years. 64% of those are identified as being needed for people with low and very low incomes. Staff are recommending that Council formally endorse the regional housing strategy and invite the regional mayors to next week's Readdress Week and especially the Regional Housing Summit that's being held on Saturday. I'm now going to turn the podium over to Abby Bond.
Good morning. If we could just get the presentation up. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today to tell you about the housing and homelessness readdress work that we're doing and our reset of this strategy. So we seem to be at a critical moment in time with regard to housing in Vancouver. And we're seeing populations across the world and Canada becoming more urban and moving to cities. We're seeing our region and our city growing, both as new people move here and new households form within our city. We're lucky to be a city with a beautiful coastal mountain setting. We have a strong civil society, and this all makes us an attractive place to work and to make your life here. We have a growing economy, an enlightened approach to sustainability, and an effective transit network with low commute times. So these are all positive things about our city and our region. However, recent trends show that we are seeing really low vacancy rates historically for renters in the city, below 1%, and that's now dipped below 1% in the region as a whole. We continue to see more people than any other city in Canada experiencing high housing stress, with the highest number of people paying more than 30% of their income on rent. And we're seeing divergent wealth and income trends as home ownership has become increasingly out of reach for many. So the focus of our readdress in terms of housing is what kind of city do we want to be and who is our city for? So we're looking at a process that we're in the first stage of right now, which is about ideas in relation to what kind of city we want to be and what kind of housing policy do we want to create for the future. We then will be doing some work around structuring a new strategy and bringing a report back to Council before we move on to implementation. So I've identified the fact that we're at a critical moment. Basically, a lot of cities around the world are seeing new roles for themselves in delivering housing and addressing affordability. So we're facing critical challenges around affordability right now, but we are halfway through our housing strategy and we've learned an awful lot about how to deliver more affordable housing in our city. We're learning how to get inclusionary housing policy to deliver finished social housing units rather than just unfinished dirt sites. We've learned that we need to take action across the housing continuum from shelters to affordable market rental and also affordable home ownership. And we've delivered more than 13,000 new affordable homes as a result of all of that work. We have a new regional affordable housing strategy, which you will hear about next. And we have a new federal government that's regained an interest in housing issues. So it seems like a good time for us to take a step back, a pause, and do a review of where we're at right now. To examine all of our tools, determine which are being most effective and which do we need to hone and sharpen. So we're pausing. This is a moment to learn, regroup, and take action. And this learning that we do should be shared with the public, shared with our partners, and it should be at a local, regional, provincial, national, and global level. So in looking around for inspiration about where to go in the future, we see a new urban agenda arising. Here I've laid out for you some words from Dr. Shipra Narang Suri, who's linked to the work on Habitat 3 that's happening right now. So she identifies the fact that in facing these challenges, that cities across the world are facing challenges in their urban centers, there's a need for a different kind of partnerships, different kind of engagement. In terms of the role of changing in cities, we see the role of planning changing within those cities. We see new opportunities for advocacy, potentially focusing on national, local governments to influence long-term changes in planning approaches and statutory planning systems. We see opportunities for us to change good practices into successful, replicable projects and scale them up. And we see opportunities to build the capacity of our planners to support expansion and reform of planning education. And as well to partner with other professions across the board and other departments in the city to find better ways to work together and support this new urban agenda. So as I mentioned, we're in the first stage of our housing reset. And this stage for us is about being open, being flexible and creative, hearing new ideas, looking for different new perspectives, being curious about some of the tensions that we see around housing in our city and entering new dialogues. And I'll talk about some of the detailed parts of this process later on, or in fact, next. So the reset work that we've been doing is only part of the work of housing in the city of Vancouver. So our normal businesses on the left-hand side of this slide is around homelessness prevention. We provide support to vulnerable groups. We're working with downtown Eastside projects to get them delivered. We're opening winter shelters. We're doing citywide and community plans, inputting into Grandview Woodlands, obviously as recently empty homes tax, short-term rentals, and support to developers and nonprofits who are looking to develop projects with affordable housing included. So that's part of our normal work. This year in 2016, we've got an additional stream of work which is around this reset strategy. And we're in the discovery phase of that. We've got a number of different moving parts to it. We've got a data and market analysis and best practice work that we've hired a consultant, EY, to help us with. We've got a number of creative advisories and specific topic workshops, which I'll talk about in a minute. As our general manager mentioned, we've got a readdress summit and week, and again, I'll talk about some of the details of that in a moment. And we've also got a broad communication and engagement strategy that we're working with Cause and Effect on to engage partners and the public around some of these issues. In addition to that, we're supporting the mayor with his group of external leaders that are coming together starting in the summer and through the rest of the fall. We also have an expert panel on the development process where we're working with industry leaders who are advising us on new ways that we can work and how we can streamline our processes. We've just initiated a new SRO task force, which is chaired by Kay Krishna, our General Manager of Development Services, and also Kathleen Llewellyn-Thomas, our General Manager of Community Services. That's also working with partners like BC Housing, Vancouver Coastal Health, SRO owners, and those who actually live in SROs as well. We also are involved in the Federal Provincial Municipal Working Group, which is an initiative from the Finance Minister, Minister Morneau, to engage specifically with cities like Vancouver and Toronto around the challenge that they're facing on housing affordability. And also we're in the midst of a national housing strategy consultation through CMHC, and so we're also planning our response to that. So a lot of different pieces of work happening right now in relation to rethinking, resetting and readdressing our housing strategy. So I wanted to touch on some of the creative advisories that we've got. So these groups began meeting earlier in the summer and are meeting through the fall, and they have staff on them and they're engaged with external partners as well, and they cover a range of, the 5 here cover a range of different topic areas that are very important in our reset. So first one is the evidence-based responses to homelessness. And we're looking at how we can support better organizations and individuals moving through recovery for people with mental health and addictions, and looking for innovations around data collection and the reporting out of some of the work that we're doing on homelessness. The second one is really around accelerating the nonprofit and city partnerships. So we do an awful lot of work with our nonprofit sector, but this is a real opportunity to take a new and a fresh look at that. And they've got a lot of ideas in the sector about how we can work better together. So this is some space specifically to focus on that. Then we've got the economy and housing for young workers and families. This is a key area of concern right now in the city, that there is a missing middle, that there is no longer a place for young families and young workers to make their home in Vancouver. And so in response to that, we're bringing together some young people themselves and their families, and also some of our key employers in the region to see how we can come up with some new ideas to address some of these concerns. We also want to improve and protect rental housing, so we have a strategic investment in rental housing group that is meeting with Landlord BC, a key partner in that. And then finally, we have an innovation and design group where we're looking at how we make the supply that we're creating better suit the needs of people in Vancouver. So those are the 5 creative advisories. In addition, we have a number of key special groups that are meeting separately or providing input into our strategy. As I mentioned, we have a new SRO task force. We're working with the Renters Advisory Committee so that they have an opportunity to influence and input into the strategy. We're going to have a specific workshop on housing diversity and supply. We are also initiating a whole range of engagement with families around our new family housing design guidelines. And we're also going to be having a special look at this missing middle in terms of the types of housing, the form and the incomes of that group to try and find new ideas that we can deliver housing for that group of people. So some of the questions that are emerging to date and some of the areas, I've put some of them up on screen here. Our partners are asking us to come up with new targets, new visions for what affordability means in Vancouver. That we're asking questions of ourselves about whether we should try to expand home ownership options. Obviously, home ownership is often a retirement investment for many people. And so if lots of people in our community are priced out of that, what does that mean for retirement and savings plans across the board? We're looking at healthy rental supply. So we're looking, should we expand areas in the city where we see more rental housing? We're looking to see whether we should be targeting incentives like Seattle has an incentive program for deeper affordability. Should we be looking at a similar type of incentive program? And whether there are any new financial tools that we should be looking at or advocating for. So there's a whole series of questions that at the moment in this discovery phase, we're still engaging with partners and not necessarily jumping to solutions initially. The next questions are around design. We see a lot of interest from our partners in progressing new forms of design, new materials, using technology, new processes, how we might better use modular housing, how we might better see more micro units across the city, how we might further incentivize more 3-bedroom homes in the city. We're also seeing, back to this new role of cities, how can we change the way that we are able to function as a city and deliver new services and new programs in terms of housing. So that's about feeding into the National Housing Strategy, but do we need to change our role as a city formally? So lots of questions are coming to us about this area. And finally, a real drive to see the city be a network city that champions affordability. How can we tap into these new relationships, new types of engagement to better support more affordability and diversity? So I just wanted to touch on the summit. It's obviously our hope that you will all come to the summit a week on Thursday. And I just wanted to touch on some of the key pieces that are going to happen at that summit. So I think we've circulated to you today a list of all of the sessions that are going to happen at that summit. It really is an international focus. We have speakers coming from Sydney. We have Sarah Hill, who's the CEO of the Greater Sydney Commission. We've got speakers coming from the University of Glasgow and Policy Scotland. We've got architects coming from New Zealand. We have Kurt Pitchinger from Vienna City. We've got Michael Lennon coming from Housing Choices Australia. We've got a variety of North American speakers as well. We've got Paul Smentanen from the Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis, Nathaniel Laster from the UBC, Professor of Sociology. We've got Generation Squeeze with Paul Kershaw, Andy Broderick from Newmarket Funds, and David Olchansky. So a real variety of speakers coming and some good panels and sessions for the day. We've got a leadership panel, a Mayor City Leaders panel, which will be really interesting to see how cities are focusing on some of the affordability challenges and what are some of the common features across cities like London and Sydney and Vienna and Seattle and San Francisco, and all of the cities that we're currently talking to. We've got a focus on Indigenous housing, so we've got people coming from New Zealand and America to also connect with us around how we might better deliver more housing for urban Aboriginals. We've got a short talk session on a variety of speakers on the future of housing affordability, and again another focus on the economic story of housing and why it's so important for a city like ours. So that's the speakers for the summit. In addition to that, as we mentioned earlier, we've got a whole series of events happening during next week. So we've got around 8 events which are free and open to the public. We've got a session on the right to adequate housing, which is being hosted by the Faculty of Law at UBC. We've got a session on renters, real estate and economic resiliency. We've got a session called Millennium Activate. We've got 2 sessions on housing design and construction. We've got a walking tour in the West End and in the Olympic Village and also in the Downtown East Side, and a more light-hearted event on the Tuesday evening called Sublime and Ridiculous, which is a series of speakers talking about some of the more unusual approaches to affordability across the world. So a lot of really great events, and we would encourage people to take a look online. So if you go to readdress.ca, you will find a full list of all of the events happening during that week, and we've also circulated the calendar for you here. So just to finish off, this is what our kind of work program looks like over the next few months. We began this process in earnest back in June, where we kicked off some of the creative advisories and engaged our consultants. And so, as I said, we're in a discovery phase right now, and that will continue for us through the next few weeks into November, at which point then we will be taking all of those ideas and what we've learned from talking to our partners and going through a process of analysis and synthesis to try and drill down and to focus on which types of actions, which types of policies we're going to suggest that we shift to or refine or improve before we come back to you in early 2017. So that's the aim, is that we come back with a new strategy which has new 5- and 10-year targets and a new focus for our next period of work on this issue. And that through all of this work, we're hopefully further going to be able to impact the issues facing us around housing affordability. And with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions.
Thank you very much. You do have some questions. Councillor Genova?
Good. I have a number of questions, and the questions include your comments and update on affordable home ownership. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for the comprehensive presentation, and also Ms. Llewellyn-Thomas for your presentation. I know that this all really does fit together. And moving forward with affordable home ownership, micro suites, and looking forward to more affordable family options, are we currently under our policy able to implement micro suites across the board and affordable home ownership, and what will it take to get us there?
So in terms of affordable home ownership, as Council is aware, you gave us some direction to further progress that policy work. However, we're not really able to progress it to the point that we would like without the provincial government giving us additional authority under the Vancouver Charter. So that is something that we've requested. While we wait for that, or wait for further conversations with the provincial government around that, we're initiating a whole series of engagement with families around updating our guidelines on family housing. So knowing that it's a priority that we want, and Council directed us to increase the number of family units that we see both in market and non-market development, we're doing that work in the fall and through into 2017. So we're continuing to progress work options for families in Vancouver while we wait for direction from the provincial government around the affordable home ownership piece.
Thank you. Another question is, and it came up a few months ago at Council, many municipalities, actually I've toured sites and projects in municipalities that do allow in-board bedrooms or borrowed light window bedrooms where the bedroom would have a window. You could have a shade or a blind, but borrows light from another room. I understand this is also a popular building technique sort of worldwide, and it is seen as a best practice in affordability. I'm just wondering if you can comment on, do we currently allow for that, and will that be something that will be recommended in the housing reset moving forward, considering affordability?
As I mentioned, we are in a discovery phase right now, so we're looking at all types of good practice on many different issues across the region and across the world. And inboard third bedrooms has been a topic of discussion, and so it is going to be something that we're going to consult on as part of our updating our family guidelines. So we'll be talking to families about their experiences of living in Vancouver and talking to them about these kinds of solutions and whether they would be supported and be popular with the type of people that we want to house in Vancouver.
Okay, thank you. Another question, just going back to the first one, is regarding micro suites. I understand that you mentioned that to move forward on affordable home ownership, we would need to consult and work with the province and move forward that way. But with micro suites, currently in planning and development, would development that provided what we would consider affordable housing allow for micro suites or an entire development of micro suites?
So we've received lots of feedback from our partners, both for-profit and non-profit partners, that this is something that they want us to look at. We currently allow micro suites in the downtown east side for rental. It's definitely been something that has helped in terms of making some of those projects viable. In terms of the kind of diversity of housing that we would like to see, I'm not sure that we would want whole buildings full of micro suites, but it's certainly something that we're looking at in terms of improving affordability and feasibility. And again, looking at other good practice from around the world, it's definitely going to be a topic of conversation in at least probably 3 of the sessions that we're running next week and in the creative advisories. So we hope to get some feedback from that process about whether we should be making any further policy changes to allow it.
Okay, and then regionally, looking at the regional strategy for this, would you be able to comment on some of the other municipalities that have implemented micro-suites, inboard bedrooms, that our city staff here have consulted with? And I'll also try and fit the next part of my question in also. Have we considered across the board flat rate CACs and DCLs, knowing that those market costs that developers pay to the city are often passed on to the home buyer and thus then the renter? So are we looking at standardized DCLs and CACs, community amenity contributions?
In terms of the metro piece, we're engaging very strongly with our regional partners around all kinds of ways that we can address affordability. So as you'll hear next, there'll be a presentation on the regional affordable housing strategy. And also there will be on the Friday of next week, there's going to be a summit of our regional partners to really get together and think about how we can better work together to make ourselves an affordable region. And so we look forward to, don't want to preempt any of the work that might come out of those events, but I know that there are lots of different ways that municipalities can work together to create more affordability. And just finally on the DCLs and CACs, again, I don't want to preempt anything coming out of this period of this discovery phase that we're in, but enough to say that there is a very distinct focus on how we finance and how we fund new approaches on affordability.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zhang.
Thank you very much. And some questions around the conference itself. I think it's a very good idea to do this. In my other life as an academic at UBC, I've been researching different housing models in different countries and different cities around the world, and I noticed that as you're talking about the different speakers you have many from Australia, New Zealand, cities similar in size and scope and resources as ours, yet we have some from New York City, which is like a mini country. What can we expect to learn from such a different place?
That's a good question. One of the things that we've been I think understanding better about the challenge that we're facing is that no matter the size of the city, many cities are facing very, very similar challenges. And so we've identified New York, and we've managed to get Vicky Bean to be our keynote speaker for the summit. And she's leader of the country's largest municipal housing agency, and she's currently responsible for delivering Mayor de Blasio's 5-year plan, which is about creating and preserving 200,000 affordable homes and apartments, which is obviously of a vastly different scale to the kind of scale that we're looking at. However, the approaches, the policies, the vision, all of those things are very transferable across cities. And so we're really hoping through the shared learning that we can learn from cities like New York, and maybe they can also learn something from us too. So it's a shared learning experience.
The one thing I did notice was that there were no speakers from places like Hong Kong. And the reason why I raise Hong Kong is I've spent some time with their housing authority there, and they're facing very similar challenges. Limited land, they've got the border to China on one side, the water on the other, yet they have millions of people living there. Why haven't we reached out to, say, Hong Kong Housing Authority or some other places in Asia that are very much struggling with the same issues we are?
We have actually, in particular, we were trying to get somebody from Singapore to come and speak and to join the conference. I'm not sure if we've been able, I know we weren't able to get them to come and speak, but we're still hoping that people may join from other cities to actually attend the conference. We've reached out across the world to really bring different perspectives from a variety of different countries and continents to a greater or lesser degree of success. Obviously, Habitat 3 is also happening right now, so many cities are involved in that too. So we're confident that we've got a broad range, and we have certainly tried to get that broad range of perspectives.
Would you say that approaches, this is sort of my impression, so as I've been researching all this stuff for a book chapter in a book we're writing at UBC, cities have really kind of dropped the idea of a broad strategy such that, everybody would, 10 years ago, housing first was the model. Everybody jumped on. We can build our way out of homelessness. That's not necessarily the case all the time. We've discovered that it needed a lot more around that. And we're going to more tailored approaches unique to each city and circumstances. Would you say that's an accurate reflection of what I'm reading from your reading?
We're certainly seeing unique responses to very unique challenges in cities. But again, there's this real appetite right now, I think, to learn from each other across cities. So even if the way that you're delivering a particular policy or a program is very much tailored to you and your unique situation, I still think that we're seeing a really strong indication from other cities that they want to better understand how we're all independently dealing with it, and that there are very much transferable knowledge and experience that can really help with moving the dial on affordability.
So with regards to the conference, one of the things I was looking at through the challenges here was the issues of mental health and addiction and how that does or does not tie in with this conference. Could you maybe expand upon that a bit?
Yeah.
What some of the thoughts were?
Yeah, it's definitely a focus for us in the conference. We have Gary Belkin, who's the Deputy Commissioner of New York City, coming to talk about their Thrive New York City plan. And so we really want to see, again, showcase what some of the world's best efforts around this really important issue. And we know that there will be, as when you bring people to your city, there's the conference itself, but then there's opportunities for our staff to meet with him and to share ideas kind of on the side as well. So we're really going to be making use of these international speakers while they're here and putting them to work. So.
Great, thank you. And my last question in my final seconds, could you describe more the missing middle thing? That was kind of cool. I hadn't seen that before. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it seems to be something that many of our partners, the public, are talking about, this idea that if we don't change the type of supply that we're able to produce, build more townhomes, create more opportunities for young, new families in our city, then they will be forced to go elsewhere. And so there's this sense, there's anecdotal evidence, there's no real data or evidence around this, but people are talking about it. And yet as a city, we continue to grow. So we have new people coming all the time, and we have stories about people leaving. And so the idea is that this middle, this new middle that are having new challenges around affordability is a new focus for us. And that the affordability challenges, which were just really focused on the lower end of the housing continuum, there are other people in our city who also need care and attention with regard to affordability. And so that's just what people are calling it, but it encompasses a huge range of potential policy options, including new types of family housing, new types of social housing, different tenures, different opportunities to stay in our city. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation, all the work on this, Ms. Bond. My first question has to do with your questions, the questions you outlined as ones we want to look at, the first of which was targeting affordability by income. And I am curious about that because right now, the range that the Mayor's Task Force for Housing Affordability set for a target for affordability goes up to almost 90,000, doesn't it? And my worry always was that we'll end up providing more new housing that meets that range. And the DCL bylaw, which sets the maximum amount for rent for the new rental apartments, it's very high, in 1,300 or something for a studio, 1,500, 1,600. So if we re-examine that range of income, would that enable us, and could we then, by policy, change the DCL bylaw to bring down what we will subsidize through forgiving DCLs and community managed contributions for purpose-built rental?
One of the reasons that we've engaged Ernst & Young in this is to provide some more data and market analysis about what types of people are moving here, what types of new households are being created, and what are their incomes. And so we have the information, the projections from the region, which you'll hear about next. But we really want to get into some of the detail around what kinds of jobs that will be created in our city over the next 5 to 10 years that will require people, a place for people to live if they're doing those jobs. And so it's an opportunity again for us to take a step back and look at where we're going in terms of the types of incomes and therefore the types of housing that we might need for people. So again, we're in this discovery phase. We don't want to predict what's going to come out of that, but there is an earnest look, if you like, at what kind of city, what kind of jobs we will have, and therefore what kind of housing we will need for the future. We know that there's a huge demand for rental housing of all kinds, and that's why we're continuing our efforts around the production of affordable market rental. Without senior levels of government, it's one of the easiest ways for us to ensure that new supply is created in the city. And so that's been a huge part of our policy to date, and we continue to see the need for that. And again, you'll hear more about that in the next presentation. But we will be taking a look at how we're able to use the city tools that we have, our city assets, to further impact affordability.
Yeah. And I hope, our policies to enable better affordability. Apropos of that and the need for rental, I noticed that one of those questions you also posed was, in effect, should we still preserve single-family home areas? That was the fifth question, I think. And I've wondered why we're not, for example, looking at ways at enabling more density, as they call it in a gentle way, in those single-family home areas by increasing the number of secondary suites. And I've wondered why we don't inventory those secondary suites that are in homes and include them in the inventory of, we're trying to target the use of them more and more by policy. So do you anticipate us looking at an inventory of that secondary suites and the possibility of increasing density in the single-family home areas through increasing the numbers, for example, of secondary suites?
In changing zoning and providing different types of housing is obviously a big focus when we go into communities and we do community plans. That's one of the main topics of conversation that we enter into with communities. And we see a variety of different responses to that through some of the community plans that come before you. Secondary suites have obviously been are a great source of affordable housing in the city, and we would love to see more of them. We're measuring the number of new permits every year. It's very difficult, in fact, it's impossible for us to go back and look at or have a sense of how many suites there are out there, because many of them were developed in time gone by when there wasn't an effective permitting process to allow them. So it's very difficult to get that inventory. But coming out of this process, will there be efforts made to increase the different types of options in communities for different types of housing, like secondary suites, laneways? Those are all things that we're hearing from the public and from partners that they want to see us look at. So I'm almost certain we will be looking at those things.
Right.
Yeah.
One final question around that, the rental housing. I know that the purpose-built rental that was built in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s is still the most affordable rental throughout the city. When was our last thorough inventory of purpose-built rental, and when will our next thorough inventory of the age and state of those buildings be undertaken?
I believe the last time we did a report was back in 2009, 2010. We don't have it on the books to do right now, but we are in the process of doing our rate of change review. We brought the first part of that to you in December of last year when we talked about the tenant protection policies, and the next phase of that work is around the stock. And so we'll be looking at the health of the stock, where we find it in the city, and some of the economic factors that are protecting it or putting it at risk. And so that will be part of the work.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks very much. I wasn't too sure when you were talking to Councillor Jang. Have you been looking at Europe as well, like some of the major European cities which are so crowded? The population compared to ours is huge, and if so, what are we getting from them? And also, when you talk about cities or possibly Vancouver becoming unaffordable, and that
young people will just have to live outside the city. Anecdotally, are there any cities that you know of that this is happening to, becoming this kind of resort? The one city that I heard of when I've been in Europe was Venice, where it was impossible for people who worked in Venice and were all the various kind of jobs to live there. It's really the very, very wealthy that live in Venice, and everybody else trains in and out for. That's just an anecdotal kind of thing I've heard.
Yeah, I can imagine land use policy in Venice to be quite difficult. Yeah. I think that we're very interested to learn from other cities with a variety of different contexts. I think just because a city doesn't have exactly the same context doesn't mean there isn't something to learn. It might mean that we have to do some more work on working how that tool might work in Vancouver. But that's what we're in the process of doing. We have somebody actually coming to do the keynote on the Wednesday, the opening keynote on the Wednesday evening at the Museum of Anthropology, who's coming from the city of Vienna. And Vienna have a very interesting, a very long-standing and well-renowned approach to housing that is certainly something that we can learn from. Their vision and the way that they approach housing is very unique, even in Europe. And so we're very pleased to be hosting Kurt Puchinger from Vienna on the Wednesday evening.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Reimer?
Thanks. Hi. Thanks for the comprehensive information. And I had a couple questions about the questions emerging from the partner engagement to date. The first one was on Q5, Section 1, which is in regards to should we be preserving the proportion of home ownership at 48% in Vancouver? Noting that that number is relatively, it's the current number, but relatively new. 15 years ago, we were at 42% home ownership. So I guess I'm interested to know what informs that as should we stay at, is it a broader question that underlines that? Like what is the ideal mix is probably where I'm going with this.
Yeah, that's a very good question. These questions are really just designed to provoke more questions. Okay. They're not the only questions that we are asking through this process. They're really engagement tools, the questions that have come up from various the creative advisories, from the mayor's leaders. And so we're kind of sharing these with all of the other groups to explain or to help all of the different pieces of this reset understand what the types of questions that other parts of the reset are asking. So it's in that shared learning, we're sharing the questions, if you like. So our approach to rental and home ownership is not going to be defined by answering this particular question, but more the places that it leads us. If everybody is talking about the proportion of rental and home ownership, that's what we should be looking at what our trends are, where this is going, what it means for the city moving forward, if we either keep those percentages, are able to keep those percentages the same, or are the trends leading us in a different direction. That's the kind of information that we're looking at that will inform the answers to the question, the solutions that we bring back to you.
Okay, that's helpful because I think the sort of or another way of looking at that question is what has it meant to Vancouver to lose so many renters over the last 15 years, right? Like has that had an impact and what has that impact been? Because I think that would inform the answer to the question as it's posed. Okay. The second questions were all around quality. A lot of this, well, in fact, all of it is focused on the question of affordability, which implies cost, right? Cost relative to income. And yet I note a lot of the solutions that were being proposed by a couple of the councillors relate to quality of the space. So they're talking about, super small suites or suites with no natural light or no way to get access to air, secondary suites, which often are they might have air, but it's a little heavy on the spore side. So and then there's also the precariousness of the tenure. So a secondary suite is a much less stable tenure for a renter. So as we're talking about affordability and these, already admittedly fairly lengthy list of questions, how does that, is the outcome of this going to be very cheap, but not very livable environments? I'm very conscious of my food challenge right now and that I am able to access very cheap food. It's just not really keeping me very focused, as you can tell. So it's sort of the same on housing, how we're dealing with the quality side.
Our current housing strategy actually looks very much at this. So the current strategy has three key parts, the first being around supply or the numbers of affordable housing that we're able to deliver. And the second theme has always been around the quality and the nature of that supply. I see in the work that we've done to date, both of those themes are still very much there. People very much want to talk about the price of housing and the cost, both of rental and ownership, but also about the qualities of that and the location, because it's also about where can you find that in the city. Can you find it for the right price? Is it affordable? But also, is it livable? It's still, you can't separate those things if we're to deliver a comprehensive and viable solution for affordability. They're all connected. So you will see those as strong themes, I'm sure, through the rest of this work.
Okay. I think for myself, if one of the outcomes of the reset, was, we get the tables around the 9 pieces of the spectrum and where these fall and how affordable they are for people from the low end of the spectrum to the high end, to also have a cross-reference against, is it accessible to transit? Does it involve like how high is the quality of the internal living environment? How good is the tenure? That would really help to start rounding out some of the discussion for people who don't have a contemporary experience of renting.
Great. That's
Okay.
very helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ms. Bond and Llewellyn Thomas and the whole team for the work on this front. I just wanted to, well, first of all, acknowledge the immense amount of work you've been doing in recent months. This has been a very intense, short timeline to reset our housing strategy, and given the current context, and I think you've done amazing work to cover as many possible bases in such a short time. And I'm really looking forward to the conference next week, but we've had lots of different panels and groups and meetings and ways to input, trying to get ideas from all fronts. I just wanted to ask and encourage down the stretch here in these last weeks of this of idea generation and inputs from people. The best way for people who have ideas, people with lived experience and challenges. I met earlier this week with a bunch of younger people who have housing challenges and are part of the Code Red campaign, bringing attention to the challenges for young folks getting housing in Vancouver. What's the best way for people to get ideas into the city at this point? Is it calling 311? Is it through the website? What other open forums exist right now in the last part of getting ideas in?
All of the above. It's easy for people to call 311 if that's their preferred choice of reaching us. That's an easy way. All of those telephone calls or emails get passed on to the team. We also have a housing email, housing@vancouver.ca, which is available on our website. We have particular website for the Readdress Summit, so people can also go there to find out, and there are links to the team as well. Or, members of the public can contact you as their elected members, and you can forward ideas onto us during these last few weeks. So many, many different ways for people to get their ideas, and also obviously to actually attend the free events themselves and contribute their ideas in person. Obviously, that's what we're really hoping to see.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and encourage everyone to share their ideas and perspectives on this. One question on the Readdress Week, whether it's the summit itself or the other events, do we have active participation from the BC and federal government? Do we have people attending to, considering that those two levels of government have primary shared responsibility for housing? Are we expecting attendance from those levels of government at various events?
We are, yes. The emails continue to come in about how people can register, and so we're expecting a good attendance from both levels of government as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions myself, Ms. Bond, and they're along the lines of what some other councillors have explored. So this question of the missing middle, is it fair to say that actually it was excluded in the sense that city policy relied on the market to deliver ownership housing? We required 20% social housing on large sites, but otherwise left it to others to figure out where the folks who could not afford to buy and were not so are not looking for a lottery win to get into social housing. I mean, that large group basically was an empty category in city policy, wasn't it?
It certainly hasn't been had as much of our focus as some of the other lower ends of the housing continuum with people on lower incomes. We've obviously had a very sustained focus on homelessness and shelters and new social housing and supportive housing in particular. And we've seen really since we last did our housing strategy, that's been one of the key changes that's happened in the city, is that group of people are now really struggling to find and stay housing and to stay in the city. And so that's why I think we're wanting to broaden out our approach. We're able to deliver new affordable market rental housing, but I think it's not just, it's looking at other opportunities, different types of tenures that missing middle may be attracted to and may want to see and may want to have access to in order to stay in the city. So.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the market does not deliver for that section of the population, and we haven't been able to get that point across to quite recently. The other thing, just quickly, is, and this is not a criticism, I'm delighted it's placed here because it's sort of leapt out at me. So should the city support housing as a right, what would it mean if we did? I mean, isn't it the case that the courts have ordered cities, provinces, and others when they're trying to deal with a homeless encampment to provide alternative housing? Is there any doubt about it? And what would deciding that it is a right entail? I guess I took it for granted, but obviously you're quite correct to raise it if others feel differently.
I think it is actually a good point for discussion. I don't think it is a given right now across all levels of government that it's seen formally as a right in Canada. And so that's why we're raising it. We're hearing it from a number of different people, a number of different parts of our community, and also our partners as well, saying that maybe now is the time to have a bit more of a formal conversation about that right to housing and what it does mean, and what is the role of a city in doing that, considering to date housing hasn't been formally the responsibility of cities. So how does a city who isn't responsible for delivering of housing address the right to housing? So there are some really difficult questions in there, and that's why we've engaged our partners. That particular session during the summit is being hosted by Margot Young at the Faculty of Law at UBC. For that reason, there are some thorny issues to be discussed during the session.
Well, I think the underpinning of our Empty Homes initiative and the single short-term rental, the emphasis on principal residence suggests that a home is a right and a second or third home is a privilege, and the use of those second and third homes may be subject to more oversight than the principal residence. Okay, thanks very much. That's great. There's no vote on this particular part, but there is further presentation on the regional affordable housing strategy?
Yes,
okay,
that's right.
Let's carry on to that.
Okay. I'm going to start this presentation. Okay, so we have a report today. Oh, colleagues just arriving. So.
Reinforcements.
Yeah, exactly.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Edna Cho, Senior Housing Planner in Housing Policy and Projects. Today I'm going to provide an update on the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy. Sorry, I'm not quite as tall as Ms. Bond. As you know, we have our General Manager of Community Services, Catherine Lewin-Thomas here. As well, I have a staff team here to answer questions. Abby Bond, Director of Housing Policy and Projects. Lisa Jimenez, Housing Planner with Housing Policy and Projects. Randy Pekarsky, Assistant Director of Citywide and Regional Planning. As well, we are joined here by our partner from Metro Vancouver, Margaret Eberly, Senior Housing Planner in Regional Planning. The presentation today will cover 3 topics: background on the development of the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy, or the RAS, the goals in the strategy, and Vancouver's actions, what we're doing to accomplish those goals. First, a bit of background on the role of the region and how the city fits within that framework. So Metro Vancouver is a regional body comprising of 21 municipalities and a Treaty First Nation, as well as 1 electoral area. In 2011, the Regional Growth Strategy, or Metro Vancouver 2040, was approved, and it's a collaborative approach to urban growth that guides future development in the region. It focuses on supporting the economy, the transportation network, environment, and the creation of complete communities. Municipalities are required to complete a regional context statement demonstrating how the municipality's plans and policies support the goals contained in Metro Vancouver 2040. City Council approved Vancouver's regional context statement in 2013. The 2016 Regional Affordable Housing Strategy is a supporting plan that focuses specifically on the issues of housing affordability. So in a region with high and rising housing costs in both ownership and rental housing, having an affordable and diverse housing supply is critical to the region's future prosperity. The purpose of the RAS is to advance the goals of Metro 2040, provide leadership that's critical on regional housing issues, and it includes a number of shared goals and strategies. The RAS was developed with over 2 years of consultation with a number of stakeholders, including the nonprofit, housing sector, business and community groups, member municipalities, and senior governments. 4 key highlights in the strategy. One is to improve affordability in the region by linking transit and housing, and that means locating housing on frequent transit networks. 2 is a focus on increasing rental supply. 3 is about expanding the role of Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation to create more mixed income rental projects. And the 4th goal is to support entry-level homeownership, encouraging diversity in the housing stock, especially for families with more ground-oriented housing. The housing market is regional in nature, and the RAS is in part a response to the significant housing affordability crisis affecting residents across the region, with these challenges being most pronounced in Vancouver. As you can see in this chart, incomes have not kept pace with house prices, both in the city and in Metro Vancouver. The gray bars represent the income required to own different types of housing, from condos, townhouses, to single-family homes. And the blue and green bars at the bottom represent the median income of renters in both Vancouver and the region. So as you can see here in this market, it is extremely challenging for renters to make the jump to home ownership. Vacancy rates are critically low in both Vancouver and the region. In Vancouver, it's at 0.6%, which is the lowest in the country, and it's 0.8% in Metro Vancouver. A healthy vacancy rate is considered to be between 3 to 5%. In addition, homelessness is on the rise, with Vancouver having the greatest share of homelessness in the region. So the next section will describe the 5 goals contained in the RAS and what Vancouver is doing to achieve those goals. So goal 1 in the RAS is about expanding supply and diversity of the housing stock. And some of the strategies in the include diversifying the housing supply, so looking at the number of bedrooms, the types of housing, so more ground-oriented row housing, and trying to expand the tenure. In addition, there's strategies about trying to improve clarity of the development approvals process, as well as to create plans to meet the needs of specific populations, such as families and at-risk populations. So how does this goal relate to Vancouver in our context? So some of the specific challenges in Vancouver include that we have a very limited supply of 3-bedroom units. Less than 1% of our stock is 3 bedrooms. In addition, only 3% of our overall stock is ground-oriented housing, so not a lot of choice between condos and single-family homes out there. And the Metro Vancouver estimates our housing demand will grow by 13,000 units for renters and 19,000 units for owners by 2026. So what has been our key actions to date? Well, we've enabled over 13,000 units of affordable housing through our housing and homelessness strategy. Recently, just this year, we took the 35% family unit requirement on rezoning projects to encourage more 2- and 3-bedroom units in both stratas and rental housing, as well as approving in principle a pilot affordable home ownership program to enable more units for families. We've also completed 4 community plans and a station precinct plan that will enable additional social housing and market rental housing supply over the next 30 years, as well as creating new zones for more ground-oriented housing. Goal 2 in the RAS is about expanding the rental supply while protecting the stock and supporting renters. And some of the strategies include increasing rental supply of new purpose-built rental housing, so not just looking at the secondary stock, as well as encouraging retention of the stock and ensuring that tenant relocation policies are in place to protect tenants in the event of redevelopment. In Vancouver, balancing rental protection with increasing new supply has been a key focus in the city. We know that 51% of all households in the city are renters. We know that 52% of rental starts in Metro Vancouver are located in Vancouver, and that the existing stock, primarily built in the 1950s and 60s, is the most affordable stock. So preservation is really important. Our key actions to date, Council has approved or enabled over 5,500 units of secured market rental housing. We've developed the Rental 100 program, which provides incentives to build more rental housing. We've created more rental opportunities through community plans and density bonusing zones. In addition, on the flip side, we've been protecting what we have. Through the rental housing stock ODP, we require one-for-one replacement of rental housing in certain zones in the city. And this ODP protects approximately 52,000 units of rental housing. In addition, we enhanced our tenant relocation and protection policy recently, December 2015, which represents the strongest protection in BC. In fact, Vancouver is leading the region in terms of net change in market rental units. We've completed more rental housing than all other municipalities in the region combined. And it's important to note that we were able to do this because we've had in place both programs to increase rental as well as regulations to prevent the net loss of rental units. So it's really having both these measures in place that we are able to increase supply and protect renters in the region. Without it, it will be challenging to meet the demand estimates set out by Metro Vancouver. Goal 3 in the RAS is about meeting demand for low and very low income groups. Some of the strategies identified include increasing non-market housing, supporting nonprofits and co-op providers to continue to operate mixed income housing after operating agreements expire, facilitating nonprofits and co-ops to create new mixed income housing through redevelopment and other means, as well as coordinated advocacy at the regional level as involvement from senior governments is necessary to meeting this goal. So how does this relate to Vancouver? So we know in Vancouver that 21% of our population fall below the low-income measure. There's a great need for social and supportive housing. Over the next 10 years, Metro Vancouver estimates that 64% of the rental housing demand in Vancouver is needed for very low and low-income households. So what have we been doing in recent years? We've approved over 3,300 units of new social and supportive housing. We've committed $250 million in land, 20 sites for development of affordable housing with partners, allocated $10 million in grants, as well as endorsed the Urban Aboriginal Strategy. And we also need to continue to work with partners to deliver more housing for very low and low-income households, because we know that these partnerships will be necessary in terms of meeting our goals. Goal 4 in the RAS is to increase the rental housing supply along the frequent transit network. Strategies include locating rental housing at transit areas and corridors, as well as encouraging mixed income projects near frequent transit networks. In Vancouver, we know that transportation costs add burden to already high housing costs, and that most new rental development is well served by a frequent transit network. Key actions to date: the Cambie Corridor Plan is identified as a frequent transit development area in the regional growth strategy, in the regional context statement, and 50% of the CACs from the Cambie Corridor go towards affordable housing. In addition, the recently approved Joyce Collingwood Station Precinct Plan is creating capacity for additional social and family housing. Goal 5 in the RAS is to end homelessness in the region. His strategies include expanding housing options to meet the needs of the homeless, promoting measures that prevent at-risk individuals from becoming homeless, and very important, advocating to senior governments for support to meet housing needs. In Vancouver, we know that homelessness is growing. The 2014 regional homeless count found 65% of the homeless to be located in Vancouver, and the recent 2016 city homeless count found over 1,800 homeless people. Our key actions to date include opening winter response shelters, enabling over 1,700 units of supported housing targeted to homeless, helping develop and fund the rent bank to prevent people who are at risk of homeless, as well as we adopted the SRO strategy as part of the Downtown Eastside Plan that seeks to improve conditions and livability in the SRO stock. And we're working with partners towards a new approach for addressing homelessness in the region. So how are we doing in meeting future housing demands? So Vancouver is doing very well in creating new rental housing for moderate income households. We've exceeded our own 5-year targets as set out in the Housing and Homelessness Strategy by 205%. And we're leading the way in creating new market rental in the region. And although we have exceeded these targets, we feel it's important to continue to increase the stocks as vacancy rates are critically low at 0.6%. In terms of meeting the housing needs of low and very low income households, Vancouver has been making good progress by using all the tools that we have at hand. And this is in recognition of that there isn't a lot of senior government programs in place currently, but more needs to be done in order to meet the targets. So Metro Vancouver has estimated that over 8,200 units are needed by 2026, and the city has enabled about 3,300 units over the last 5 years. We will need additional tools and partnerships to meet the estimated demand and deepen affordability over the next 10 years. The reset of the Housing and Homelessness Strategy, which you just heard a presentation on, will include policies and tools and innovative partnerships to meet and hopefully exceed the housing demand estimates prepared by Metro Vancouver. So in summary, what we're asking today is we're putting forward 2 recommendations. Recommendation A is for full endorsement of the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy. And recommendation B is a call for action to all Metro Vancouver mayors requesting immediate action to address affordable housing issues in the region, including asking them to endorse the RAS, increasing rental supply, and ensuring that measures are in place to prevent the net loss of existing rental housing units, a renewed commitment to end homelessness in the region and respond to growing incidents of encampments, as well as to advance the urban Aboriginal housing strategy. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We have some questions. Councillor Jang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I remember in 2016, I went to the Metro session to develop the new RAS. I remember going there and working with all the folks on around the region on it. And one thing that strikes me is that from the presentation, the Metro presentation, its projections are based on a 10-year plan. And everything that we're talking about is a 10-year plan. However, in Vancouver, we did a 10-year plan, and 5 years in, we've had to change it because the projections had changed. How confident are we that these 10-year projections are accurate, or at least prognostic enough for us to plan around? I mean, we're undertaking a huge change halfway through our 10-year plan.
I'm going to let Margaret Eberly, Senior Housing Planner from the region, to answer that question.
Thank you. Yes, as part of the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy, our advisory group, which was composed of housing planners from around the region, advised that undertaking a reset or an update of our regional affordable housing strategy using old estimates of housing demand would not be in the best interests of the region, so undertook to update and revise those numbers based on more recent census information, so from the 2011 census, and also based on the use of a sort of a more well understood methodology, as well as looking at the situation in each municipality. So our previous estimates had sort of assumed that the rate of rental provision would be the same in all municipalities in the region, and we know that's not true, that there are some areas of the region, for market reasons, that are more attractive to rental owners and renters. So we feel that based on the best available information and looking at a range of different scenarios, that the numbers that are presented in the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy are our best information at this time. That's not to say that with some future events or some future shock to the housing market that the estimates might not need to be revised, and we will monitor them over time.
Okay, I think that's the key thing for me, is that we continue to monitor these things as each city takes a different approach. You go to Richmond, it's very different, the approach from Burnaby and Vancouver. We saw what Vancouver's doing. Sort of when I think about Richmond and Burnaby, just in general, and what they're trying to create, and what Vancouver's doing in other places around the region, do you think that, you know, for example, I was struck by the number, we need 8,250 units of low-income housing. That's a very specific number. How good's that number? I mean, is it already out of date? I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is the question. It seems very low to me.
Well, we did, with this round of housing demand estimate updates, try to be a little bit more finer grained in terms of the income categories that we're using. Okay. So we have provided more specificity. So there are 5 income categories now instead of 3. So we do have a level of confidence with the numbers, but again, the ability of municipalities and regions to meet their housing demand estimates for these low-income categories will be fairly highly dependent on senior levels of government. And that is something that we've actually baked right into the strategy, is saying that these estimates are virtually unattainable without senior government support.
Right. Edna.
Just to add a bit of clarification, the 8250 is Vancouver's share. So the number in the region for very low and low income is much higher. That's just Vancouver's, what we're expected to produce to meet housing demand for the city of Vancouver in the next 10 years. And that actually does line up very well with our housing and homelessness strategy. If you look at those numbers, which were done from 2011 to 2021, slightly different time frame, it's about 7,900. So it's very similar. And of course, now we'll be updating our targets through the reset.
Okay, no, that's good. That now makes a lot more sense to me. We see a lot of development and opportunities happening in the larger municipalities, Vancouver, Richmond, Burnaby, for example, and this is more maybe a question for Metro. So the large municipalities are sort of creating the bulk of the housing these days. And how is Metro assisting the smaller ones that doesn't have the same capacity, the same planning staff, the same kind of great housing staff that Vancouver has to actually help the other cities, municipalities reach targets such that the complaint is the bigger ones are always doing all the heavy lifting. What about everybody else?
That's a really good question. Certainly with the sort of renewed interest and enhanced seriousness of the housing affordability situation in this region, I would say that more municipalities are stepping up than in the past. For example, I know there's a rental housing task force in White Rock right now. The District of West Van is looking at some rental incentive measures. New West has a mayor's affordable housing task force. So I think within their capacities, a number of municipalities are definitely stepping up. But that being said, that is one of the rationales for a Metro Vancouver role in housing policy, is to provide support to member municipalities, mostly the smaller ones. And our ability to do that has been perhaps constrained up until quite recently by the fact that there's very little resources at Metro to do that. There's one housing policy position. But recently, as part of the implementation of the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy, there has been expressed interest in expanding Metro's scope to provide assistance to municipalities. So going through the approval process now at Metro is a request for some additional staff in the housing policy and housing development area that could be used to expand those assistance services.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the report. I appreciate it. And this might require both of you to answer, so you can come up first. Thanks. So thank you for clarifying, first of all, that what we're building in terms of new rental housing is really aimed at moderate incomes, $50,000 a year and up. So to provide the rental housing that's needed by those who are more financially challenged, to the lower income and the working families, the young people, we need to protect the current affordable housing that's there, the purpose-built rental. Thank you for saying that over and over. The current existing purpose-built rental is the most affordable housing. So I'm wondering, in my talking with people within the development industry, they have said the best way to do it is to reinstate the federal tax advantages through the program of federal the capital gains tax. So there was incentives to build purpose-built rental. That's why we got so much of it across the country. And they're saying now if we could only pressure the government to reinstate that and to add for the upgrade, the energy and standards of maintenance upgrades to the current existing purpose-built rental as a capital gains exemption, a lot more of that would take place. So what are we doing as a city and a region to pressure the federal government in this regard?
So in the terms of the city, we are in discussions with our partners. In addition, as you know, there's the National Housing Strategy submission that's coming up. So we will be looking to include some of those asks and measures as part of our submission. As well, we're looking through the reset at all the different tools that are available that could help incentivize rental again. You know.
Yep.
And we're also involved with the FCM process, working with other
Great.
municipalities and mayors in Canada.
Good. Yeah, there is an opportunity now. And regionally, is that happening as well?
Regionally, in the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy, one of the asks of the federal government is to look at reinstituting some or all of the previous tax incentives that were in place. And as part of the implementation of the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy, we have conveyed a letter to the senior levels of government with the specific asks that were outlined in RAS, and that one was included in the federal letter.
Great. This is also to both of you. I noticed that one of our biggest challenges is entry-level home ownership. I mean, it's a really hard one to get at. I can't think of a better example in our region. It's not in Metro Van, but Whistler, in terms of the Whistler Housing Authority, and they're asking of a certain percentage of townhouses, condos, etc., to go into the housing authority at cost, and then they sell them at cost, which is about 50% less. When I asked, they said $650,000 townhome on the market is about $375,000 through our process. Are we looking at that within the region and the city?
So in the city, as you know, we brought forward a affordable home ownership program for you to approve in principle. And we don't have, right now, we're waiting for the enabling legislation from the provincial government in order for us to develop a program. So our next step is to do more additional consultation on that pilot program. Whistler Authority has a different authority under the charter to be able to do that program, which are under the Local Government Act, which our charter does not give us the authority to do so.
Sounds like a good ask there. And regionally, are there other municipalities looking at this?
I would say there is some interest in other municipalities in some kind of affordable home ownership initiatives, but that might be more limited than what you might expect in Vancouver. And just to say that, there are some municipalities where home ownership is much more affordable relative to the city of Vancouver, so Surrey or Langley, for example.
For sure. Okay, one final question, and that has to do with the issue of the livability of the single residence occupancy suites. It's on page 11. There's a discussion of it in this report, noting that the SROs are the last resort before homelessness. So I'm wondering what the challenges are in terms of our tools, both within the city and the region, to hold landlords accountable for their standards of maintenance in a timely way. I mean, best practices, I know in San Francisco, they have like 7 days if you have the heat out or no hot water, and changes are made. But I'm wanting to know what we could do to improve that situation.
Yes, obviously livability and certainly enforcement around standards of maintenance is going to be a key effort of ours. It is right now, and it's going to continue to be moving forward. And part of the work of the SRO task force that we've just initiated is to look at best practices around the world. We have some significant new expertise on staff at the City of Vancouver with regard to efforts being made around this type of housing in other cities. And we will be looking to really ramp up our efforts around livability in the SROs. To do that requires significant focus and effort from our other senior government partners, both at the provincial level and the federal level. This is a almost unique type of housing that we find in Vancouver. There is some of that housing in Victoria as well, but it's not a type of housing that is seen across the region or in BC. So we do need a very unique and focused effort on this.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Genova?
So many questions in only 5 minutes. So I'll start with the first one that was at the bottom of the list, but now Councillor Carr has sparked my interest. With affordable home ownership, looking at it both from a city strategy and regionally. The Whistler model, I understand the entry is very good, that you purchase in at cost, but when you exit out at cost, if your housing needs, your family needs have changed, then you actually may preclude yourself from getting back into the market and buying something that's more suitable. Is that something that has been considered? I understand our chief housing officer has said that's why we're looking at a hybrid approach. And could you comment on that, both from a city point and regionally? Thank you.
So as council and members of council may remember, when we brought the proposal to you for affordable home ownership, we did do a very robust review of other cities in the region, and we looked at different approaches to delivery of affordable home ownership, of which Whistler is obviously a very good local example. Their approach is very different because they have what is, I guess, known as a closed housing market. It's a very tight market in Whistler, and it's very focused on key workers and maintenance of key workers in their city. We decided to recommend a different approach because Vancouver is a much more open market, and it's in fact a regional market. So we recommended a different approach. As we've said, we're waiting for approval or for those additional powers. As part of the regional response to affordable home ownership, as Ms. Eberle mentioned, different municipalities face this challenge to different degrees with regard to home ownership. The experience in Vancouver is particularly extreme, especially over the last sort of year to 18 months. But we anticipate more conversations to have about this at a regional level. In fact, I anticipate that this would be one of the key areas of discussion when we bring mayors and other municipal staff together at the regional summit next week, is that I suspect we will be talking about sharing ideas about what new efforts, new policies or programs we might see across the region and how we would support each other in delivering something new like affordable home ownership.
Thank you very much. My next question is for Ms. Eberle regarding Metro Vancouver and your stance on the regional housing strategy to create affordable homes. I also want to talk about market but I also want to talk about nonprofits. So, and I, working in the nonprofit world myself, I won't use my own example, but for instance, an organization like the YWCA comes to the City of Vancouver and looks to partner with a developer, and might go to the City of North Vancouver, the District of West Vancouver, and do the same thing. The guidelines change, the goalposts change, and it makes it difficult for nonprofits, especially nonprofits that might not have as much experience in housing, to be able to work with different municipalities and provide housing regionally. Could you comment on what guidelines may change and through this process?
Sure. This certainly did come up at our stakeholder consultation, is some of the challenges faced by nonprofits in trying to develop new affordable housing, both just from a financial point of view and from a capacity point of view, and from the point of view of the different requirements and processes in different municipalities. Now, of course, those are that is our governance structure, and municipalities will choose their own develop their own development approval processes. But as far as the regional affordable housing strategy is concerned, there is a strategy in there that requests that municipalities ensure that their development approval process is clear to benefit both private developers and nonprofit developers. And there is also a recognition or a request for municipal policies to be very clear with respect to what they expect from nonprofit developers, right? So that it makes the process of developing nonprofit a little bit easier. And I guess the final point I would say is that with potential new resources at the metro level, there may be some assistance for nonprofits or partnerships that nonprofits could form to help enable some of these developments.
Thank you. I just have one more quick question, and that's regarding, I see that in the report it's very light on sort of the regional strategy and a collaboration with the provincial government. I understand that BC Housing in all municipalities throughout Metro Vancouver, unless you can name one, goes to BC Housing and requests funding, either rent supplements or however they may do that, construction financing for projects that they rely on for affordable housing. Is there any piece of this policy that talks about regionally going to the province and working collaboratively?
I think as part of the implementation of the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy, Metro will be preparing its own strategic implementation plan, so guiding our actions, so Metro Vancouver and Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation's actions to implement the Regional Affordable Housing Strategy. And it's possible that that could be one of the approaches, that we look at the sort of regional housing needs and make some kind of a request that would be benefiting all municipalities. I can't really presuppose what we're going to do, but that is something that we might be considering.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks to you all for this presentation and the background that's, I think, important for us in terms of endorsement of the regional affordable housing strategy. I just wanted to just check in on a couple fronts regionally. First of all, 2017 is Metro homeless count. That will be happening in March in alignment with the city's count. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. This coming year, 2017, is a regional count which we will be participating in, yeah.
And I know there was some concern, coming on 3 years ago, we had a particularly high count or higher percentage than previous counts, and I know there was concern at the number of volunteers able to participate around the region, that it was challenging to have enough people out to count across the whole region. We do it every year in Vancouver and have a pretty keen base of many hundreds of people who do it here. Is there organizing or help that we can do to make sure there's enough people around the region, particularly given there's homeless camps in the cities and communities around the region now, which was not the case just a few years ago?
Yeah, you raise a good point. We do have a really good, strong network of volunteers in the City of Vancouver, and we're incredibly grateful to them showing up every year, year after year, to help us with the count. This time of year, we're about to go into the detailed planning phase for next year's regional count. And of course, we will be offering any assistance to Metro that we can with regard to supporting them and their volunteers in this effort. It's really important that we continue to do this regional account. And indeed, we're also collectively involved in the discussions at a federal level as to whether the federal government is also going to do a national point-in-time count as well, and whether that will be in 2017 or 2018. So there's a number of different aspects to that.
Okay, and does Metro Vancouver regional government, the GVRD, how directly involved are they with respect to the Metro count and helping to organize that?
I guess as an overall responsibility, the regional homeless count is part of the community entity agreement that Metro has with the homeless partnering strategy. So it is one of the functions that Metro is required to carry out. In terms of day-to-day planning, that is left to the sort of technical committee that has been formed by the homeless partnering strategy and the consultants that have been hired to implement the count. But sort of as far as general oversight, the Housing Committee is kept apprised of developments on the count.
Okay, that might be worth then some work. Those of us that are at directors at Metro Vancouver or certainly among the mayor's committee that we do some more work to make sure there's support from different municipalities comparable to what we're doing here in Vancouver. That it sounds like it's it's the best efforts are made, but we could use a lot more support within communities to get more volunteers out and help support the count overall.
I do know that since the count, the regional count has begun, that a number of community and sub-regional homeless tables have been formed. So in the Tri-Cities and on the North Shore, that are very actively involved now in helping organize the count and recruiting volunteers. Mm-hmm. So I think there is some additional capacity at the local level that perhaps hasn't been available always in the past.
I would assume that's due to the fact that there's homelessness, there's homeless camps, there's challenges all over the region. And that maybe segues into my broader question, which is a bit open-ended around jurisdiction. And from what I know, local governments actually have no direct responsibility for housing and dealing with the crisis that we have on our streets and parks right now. And that would be both municipalities and regional governments, as far as I understand that the responsibility for housing and it lies purely with provincial and federal governments, and it's been local and regional governments that are dealing with the crisis every single day with all of our staff, and that has put us in a situation where we take responsibility in varying degrees, some cities more than others. But can you just clarify that? There seems to be constant confusion around which level of government's responsible. And the regional government it's great to see enhanced action taking place, but it seems to also stem from the desperation that we're facing at a local level.
Well, yeah, I mean, the regional government is the local governments, right? It's a organization or collaboration of local governments. I guess I would say that municipal governments and local governments, there is a range of involvement that they may choose to take on the housing file, some very active, as in Vancouver, and some less active, as in some other municipalities. In terms of sort of jurisdictional responsibility, I think that there is a case to be made for it being a provincial responsibility. And I think to some extent the province has been stepping up with some recent announcements. But the fact remains that the level of resources are not sufficient to address the needs.
I would just add we've had great success with partnering with the provincial government around their investment in housing in the city of Vancouver. And we've seen that over the last few years, and we've now seen a new interest in housing at a federal level. Both of those things give us cause for optimism. However, I think the scale of the challenge faced by us and other governments around the region, how we're seeing that play out in terms of an increasing number of encampments, the number of people who are still living on the streets, warrants further action at both levels, and also ourselves as well. So we're looking, when we're looking at our reset, we're looking at how can we better make our tools work, how can we better have greater impact with the use of our tools and our financial investment, and also to our other levels of government. Although it's important to identify jurisdictional responsibility to the person on the street and to our staff who are working with outreach, it almost in some ways doesn't matter. They just need the services and the help at the point that they need them. So we have to figure all of those arrangements out ourselves and make sure that, if we can, make sure that no one else has to stay another winter on the streets in the region.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Reimer.
Yes, I wanted to give a plug for the mixed income transit-oriented rental housing study coming. If there was a way to get a presentation on that at council, I think it'd be fantastic. I personally know a lot about it because I'm on the right committee at Metro, but I'm guessing we'd all find it really interesting if we could get that. Yes? Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so there's a recommendation here. Is someone prepared to move the recommendation? Councillor Jang. Any further debate? Councillor Genova, do you want to debate this?
Yes, I have sent an amendment in to the clerk. So before I read the amendment, I'll explain that I know that all municipalities, and Councillor Jang talked about his experience as an academic. I have a lot of experience in working in the nonprofit sector of housing and understanding that every municipality in Metro Vancouver has made requests of the provincial government for funding. And as our own staff have said, we've very much benefited from the funding that BC Housing has offered us, especially in the downtown east side. What's troubling to me is in the recommendations that we're going to pass here at our own city council, I don't see the acknowledgement of that, or in us moving forward to work with BC Housing to provide more affordable housing, but also to make sure that we are asking for that money. I know that Councillor Carr and myself had met with Minister Coleman at UBCM. We were the only councillors at the City of Vancouver meeting time that was scheduled. We only had 15 minutes, but we did share the time. And affordable home ownership as well as affordable housing was something that I did discuss with the minister, including the great investment that BC Housing has made in the City of Vancouver. There are only so many dollars. I would like to see a regional approach, but I want to make sure that as a Vancouver City Councillor, I'm advocating for provincial money for the residents of the City of Vancouver. So the amendment reads as follows, that the mayor write a letter to Minister Rich Coleman, the minister responsible for housing for the province of British Columbia, and notify him of council's formal endorsement of the regional affordable housing strategy, and thank the provincial government for the funding BC Housing has invested in Vancouver. Furthermore, this letter will also express the City of Vancouver's commitment to work with BC Housing to increase affordable housing in the City of Vancouver.
Councillor Carl, advance you off that, and then maybe, I saw Mayor Robertson there before you came on. So Mayor Robertson, do you want to go next? And then we'll see Councillor Carr. Sorry, where are you here? Okay.
Hopefully a friendly amendment here that Mayor write a letter on behalf of council. That's what we have always had in our directions to my office, to put a letter together that is on behalf of council versus just from me specifically. So that, assuming that's friendly, that's what we've done historically on this front. Okay, probably we should go in both places then, just so it's clear that our whole council is calling for this. Yeah. Those minor additions in A. And I would just say it's, we have regular communications, both staff and political, with the minister and his team, his staff at the province, and constantly express our thanks. Although it is worth noting that those are actually Vancouver taxpayer dollars that are being reinvested back into the city. So I think those thanks also come with an expectation that the appropriate resources that we pay taxes towards come back and are invested in the responsibilities of the province. And noting the comments made by our staff speakers, housing is a primary responsibility of the BC government and provincial governments across the country. So I think we do have to continue to ensure that the provincial government steps up and takes on that primary responsibility. We have housing and homelessness chaos across the province right now, and it's absolutely crucial when there are massive surplus budgets that funding is invested directly into affordable housing and solving homelessness. And there are local governments and like Vancouver and regional governments here in Metro that are willing to step up and contribute and do everything we can for local leadership, but we absolutely need much more significant investment to solve homelessness and address the affordable housing crunch we face, and that needs to come from the BC government. And we will be even more thankful when they deliver on their commitments and their responsibilities. So appreciate the work done by staff on this, and we'll support the motion as it is in front of us with this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and really my deep felt thanks to our staff who are doing incredible work on the housing file within the city. It's extremely complicated, and it's the hugest challenge that we are facing. So I really appreciate all that, the work and the collaboration beyond our city's borders to the region on this particular, in support of this particular report. You know, I do think the challenges are great. I'm fully supportive of the motion, and I very much appreciate Councillor DiGenova putting in the addition of C, and that has been accepted as a friendly amendment to the motion, because you know earlier.
Friendly amendment. The friendly amendment was.
Oh, well, my understanding from the mayor, excuse me, I'm at the mic. My understanding from the mayor is that that we are voting on this motion, including C. Is that not the case?
Well, do you have a point of order, Councillor DiGenova? You can direct your comments through the chair. I'm not sure why you're interrupting, Councillor.
What section?
Okay, what's the issue? Do you have a point of order, Councillor DiGenova?
I'm trying to bring it up on my queue here. Just a moment. While I do, I can just say that I understood that the wording on behalf of council was a friendly amendment, but the amendment still stood as an amendment. So that was my understanding as to why we were in an amendment queue.
Well, we're on the amendment queue because you moved an amendment. Now we're speaking to it. You've said you don't have any issue with it, but we'll still vote on including it. So Councillor Carr is in order. Go ahead, please, Councillor Carr.
I wanted to clarify.
Thank you. So I am speaking simply to the amendment at this point.
Yep.
And thank Councillor DiGenova for putting forward the amendment. I do note that earlier in today's agenda, I did make note of one of the reports that we did pass by consent, which was a very creative way of raising money up front to provide social housing at the YWCA Fire Hall number 5 site, and that kind of collaboration between BC Housing and our staff and the YWCA and all partners involved is exactly the kind of thing we want to see more of. So thanking the provincial government for its efforts to date, and expressing our willingness to pursue continued collaborations, because that is what we need, I think is very much in order. So I will be, of course, supporting. I'm seconding the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Reimer. Oh, sorry, Councillor Reimer, could you please go on again? I hit too low on the screen there. Thank you. Okay.
I had a friendly amendment, which was to insert the word ongoing after the word Vancouver's and before the word commitment. I'm just waiting to hear from Councillor DiGenova.
That's fine.
Okay. I mean, obviously not surprising to anyone here that the last 8 years we've had a very good working relationship with BC Housing, and I would hate to not have that reflected in a communication with them, lest they think we thought otherwise about it. I will share with you at Metro Regional Planning Committee this past week, the Mayor of West Vancouver, who is I would say on the far right of the political spectrum by his own disclosure, described his meeting with Minister Coleman as the most useless 15 minutes of his life, which is saying a lot given the types of stories that he has related at Metro about the things he does with his time. But, you know, if this letter is the thing that does it, that's great. So I appreciate Councillor DiGenova bringing it forward.
Yeah, that's a fairly long time, too. Okay, so we'll go back to the main queue. We're ready for the vote, unless there's other people who want to speak, Ms. Aguilar. So any further debate on the motion as amended? Oh, we're going to vote on the amendment, sorry. Okay, would you please, we'll go to the voting screen, vote to. All those in favor of the amendment? I see you're up there again, Councillor DiGenova. Do you want to speak on the main motion? Or?
Yes, I wanted to speak on the
Okay, so we're just going to do the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? I guess I have to show two. So streamlined now. Do we have a voting screen? You'll have in favor, yeah. I'm not seeing a screen here, that's why I didn't. Okay, so Councillor DiGenova, you want to speak on the main motion?
Yes. I'd first of all like to thank staff very much, and I'd also like to thank Ms. Eberly for coming from Metro Vancouver. I have for several years, before I was even here at council, but through my work with nonprofits in the housing sector and also in the private sector of real estate development, I understand that working together regionally and looking at a strategy like this will help so many. I think it will help market development, market housing, as well as nonprofit housing. And I'm really excited to see a regional affordable housing strategy. I know that this isn't something new, that Metro Vancouver has been working on regional housing and affordability for some time now. But I do have some hope that with this motion and what we've passed, and with our mayor writing on behalf of council to other mayors in Metro Vancouver and in the region, that we will be able to come up with a strategy that helps our residents and people who perhaps can't afford to live in our city, but they're able to work in our city because they're able to live in other areas in Metro Vancouver. So that to me is very important. I'm very much looking forward to attending the Housing Summit. I've already registered for that. And I'd like to thank our staff for your involvement in making sure that we have the very best conference that we can here in Vancouver. And I'm very excited to attend that. And also very excited from what I heard this morning, although it does fit in many of the new ways that we are going to encourage affordable homes, whether that be affordable home ownership, micro suites, considering inboard bedrooms in the future. I think that this will all come together in a way that we will see, especially with the crazy real estate market in Vancouver. Hopefully we'll see more millennials and young families being able to afford that housing, and we won't see seniors quite as stressed as they are and having to rely on other things that tied in this morning, such as the food bank and welfare shelter rates. With $375 a month for the clients that I serve sometimes, I know that it's difficult to make that work with rent supplements, and I thank our staff for making sure that that works before they bring each and every single project that fits under our policies for affordable housing to the City of Vancouver. I'm hoping that we'll be able to share that info with other municipalities and learn from them as well moving forward to create a gold standard and best practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson, or Mayor Robertson, sorry.
I spoke to the amendment. I don't need to add much more. Thanks.
The queue came storming back there. Okay, so we're ready for a vote on the motion as amended. I think the screen is up. Is that right, Madam Clerk? So all those in favor, please show. Okay. Okay, and that's unanimous. Thanks very much. So normally it's our practice to recess at noon, but I think City Manager wants us to go in camera briefly, and we have one item left, so I'm at council's hands. We could continue to complete the public business, then go in camera. 2 items in camera, you mean? One here, a speaker here, yes. Okay, so what's people's wish? Do you want to recess? Yeah, okay. So we need a motion to extend past 12 to the completion of business. Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's great. Okay, the first one is ensuring Vancouver development levies are not used to fund transit. We do have a speaker to this motion. Did you have introductory comments, Councillor Carr, that you wanted to make? Sorry, There we go.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just be very brief. I had heard a number of times it was mentioned, not necessarily in the media, but through conversations that the province was looking at potentially linking the investment into transit in any city to 2 things. One is the city's upzoning, increasing density, residential density along the transit routes, and number 2, to require the use of community amenity contributions or development cost levies in funding that transit. I was concerned enough about this that I raised it at the recent Union of BC Municipalities meeting in Victoria to one of the sessions, one of the larger sessions, which was attended by 2 ministers, and asked that they respond to this rumor and or respond to my concerns around the intrusion of provincial authority on 2 very clear levels. One is the authority of the city to zone and plan, and secondly, the authority of the city to enact our own community amenity contributions and development cost levies bylaws and collect that money and use it for purposes that are determined through our planning processes and policies. So the response from the 2 ministers was to not deny that this may happen, and instead to respond that they would not want to intrude, but that it makes sense to proceed down the path of linking transit with density. And one of the ministers noted that that conversations with the development industry expressed interest in funding transit through development levies. So that was the prompt for me to put this forward as a motion. I believe that the development levies that we do levy within the city are stretched so thin in terms of supplying the money needed for already very, very important community amenities, and that includes the whole range of community centers, recreation facilities, neighborhood houses, parks, libraries. The list is endless, and we've certainly as a city added affordable housing into that. And it's my belief that if we try and use those levies to fund transit, we will shortchange the community amenities so desperately needed, and in fact, really could be invested in even more if we had more development levies.
Okay, thanks. So we'll hear from our speaker, Mr. Larry Benji. Is he here? Mr. Benj here? Larry Benj, third and last time? Apparently not present. Okay, so you're interested in debating this, Councillor DeGenova? You can go ahead.
I just wanted to offer my support to Councillor Carr on this motion. I understand, and we've spoken about it this morning, I think it ties in perfectly to looking at our affordable housing and homelessness strategy as well. And with so many, or I should say with an increase in the numbers of homelessness over the past especially few years, I'd have to say that I think that we really have to look at where we're spending these dollars and the development levies. It's not to say that we don't need transit, but to make sure that we protect this money and we make sure that it's going into what we already have decided is policy to put it towards. I think that that's very important. I think that this motion outlines that perfectly, and I feel that we need to keep advocating for transit funding, but not in this way. So I'm more than happy to support Councillor Carr on this motion as is written. Thank you.
Mayor Robertson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've, first of all, I appreciate the efforts of Councillor Carr on this front, and I've got a strike and replace motion that is basically intended to simplify this motion down to the key elements to make it consistent with the work that the Mayor's Council's been doing towards a region-wide development contribution to public transit. And my goal here is to ensure that there isn't any language that could perhaps dilute or distract from the key points here, which are really ensuring that the province does not intrude on municipal jurisdiction or regional jurisdiction and raise revenue for transit investment, which they need to contribute from the tax base that they rely upon, which is dramatically bigger than the one that we rely upon. So this is really ensuring that that the cities and the region's authorities and responsibilities on land use and zoning are respected, and also consistent in terms of the dollars that we might potentially raise around the region from development as a local contribution to funding transit improvements. So this is a much simpler version. I think it takes the essence of Councillor Carr's points that I absolutely agree with, but it definitely distills it down to the key pieces, just so that there's no extraneous language that might be problematic. So I will put that on the floor as a strike and replace motion, and hope that we can move forward with this. And on the whole, things look quite optimistic in terms of raising funding from the province and tools from the province for regional contribution to transit and transportation investments. We still have lots of work to do on that front. These next couple of months are absolutely crucial for getting the province and the federal government committed to the entire 10-year mayor's plan, and ensuring that we're clear with these messages on development contributions around the region and local responsibilities is really important right now. So thanks to Councillor Carr for bringing this forward. I think it's important to clarify this point. Appreciate the motion, and we'll look forward to being successful over the months to come with the province and the feds.
Your seconder? Councillor Carr?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. So we are in an amendment queue then on this?
Take the clerk's direction on that. If it's a strike and replace motion, then we're in a main motion queue, right?
We are in a main motion, so it's, all right, so this is what we're
What you see is
discussing.
what you would.
I'll respond to this new motion then. And so I do, well, I would like to see, actually, I would rather have it the way it was, which was 3 different points rather than further that, because I would like the motion severed. So if it's possible to sever the further that, it was at point number 3, and I would have asked for severance on that. Can I still sever further that?
Yes,
All right, that's fine. We'll sever it. Great. Then I would like to respond by saying, well, first of all, of course, I will support the first clause because it is my clause repeated. And in terms of the second, I will support that, but it isn't the same as what my original motion had stated. My original motion made it clear that the City of Vancouver itself will not proceed with using development levies, our own development levies for transit. And the reason for that is that I really believe that that is a slippery slope. We start small with a few bus bulges or a transit shelter, and then we end up with an incredible amount of pressure from senior government that should be funding the transit to use more of our development levies in that form. And once senior governments who have funded transit realize, oh, well, the cities can do it through their own development levies, I think that they will count on us to do it through development levies. And development levies are in short supply in terms of the demand or the need around the particular uses we put them to now. The long list of community centers and the slow pace of renovations of those and upgrades and replacements of them or other facilities or addition of parks or upgrades of parks or child care, libraries, and now affordable housing, which 50% of our levies are going towards, community amenity contribution levies. The need is very big, and I'm extremely concerned that we should not be using our levies that way. And my final point on that really is also that if the province wants some local support in terms of funding for transit, they should provide new sources of tax revenue or new sources of revenue for that purpose. And I think the Mayor's Council has recognized that because their first suggestions around how to fund transit at the local level were things like a local carbon tax or distance charging in terms of vehicles. And those are very appropriate. It's a new source of revenue. I'm extremely concerned that the one big source of revenue we have, other than our tax of property, is our development levies, and don't want to see those spread thin. So I will support 2 because it's obvious I don't want provincial intrusion into municipal jurisdiction. I regret that my other point, though, about not wanting to spread too thin the development levies from our own city perspective is now missing from this motion, and I will not support will not support 3 at this point for the reason being that I think the province should be enabling the region to come to have a new source of revenue to fund transit, as the Mayor's Council originally had pushed for.
Okay. Seeing no further speakers, we'll go to a voting queue, and we'll do 1 and 2 together, and then 3, if that's okay with you, Councillor Carr.
It's fine.
Okay. So, Madam Clerk, if you can just show us a voting screen, we'll vote on...
So first is 1 and 2?
Yeah, we're just voting now on 1 and 2, so all those in favor, please show. I show that unanimous. So if we just refresh the screen now, we can go to the 3rd section, which is was 3, but now is just a 3rd paragraph. So all those in favor, please show. And we have Councillors Carr and DeGenova opposed. Okay, so that concludes that item. We'll just now go to the issue of taxi licensing. And I was the one who tabled the motion, but I think it's self-explanatory. I don't propose to make any further comments. Ms. Bauer, if you'd like to speak, please go ahead.
Oh, I think that's just a holdover. Thank you.
Pardon me?
It's a holdover.
Thank you. Okay, welcome.
Everyone for having me speak here this morning. I understand that competing forces have probably been pushing politically at every one of you in regards to ride sourcing, in regards to out-of-town suburban taxi companies, and for that I sympathize with you because I certainly hear it every day. As you know, the Vancouver Taxi Association has worked diligently hard with city staff, with the residents of Vancouver, and we're proud of the work that we have accomplished over the years. In January of 2016, Premier Christy Clark appointed Peter Fassbender to conduct a province-wide review of ride-sharing services. In September of 2016, Minister Fassbender released what is now known as the Ride Sourcing BC Stakeholder Engagement Summary. And that's exactly what it was. It was a ride sourcing engagement summary. It was who was involved in these talks and how they were going to proceed with these. To be clear, they talked about ride-hailing companies. The province has not made a decision on what their plans are to move forward. They are still entertaining and asking people to give input as pointed out in their stakeholder paper. The two issues that the Vancouver Taxi Association has been told that government is contemplating is allowing new entrants with different standards for licensing, insurance, lower levels of service to the disabled, which will create an unlevel playing field and hamstring the taxi industry's ability to compete. Many of the costly operating items are imposed on our taxi industry by various levels of government. Additionally, the elimination of municipal boundaries would create chaos in the incumbent industry. It would create a free-for-all and a takeaway any incentive to modernize our businesses for the future, thus dooming the Vancouver taxi industry to failure. The Vancouver industry would fall, and service across the city and region would definitely deteriorate. Bringing the industry together, first we initiated a proposal to the province on a wide technology solution using a European app, which the Vancouver Taxi Association brought to British Columbia. There has been a host of issues that we encountered that were beyond our control, such as the incumbent dispatch servers providing and refusing to assist us in implementing the new technology framework. Next, we have advanced concept of a province-wide driven standard, which led to an MOU among the different taxi associations. So unfortunately, with our taxi associations, at times, they come to a stalemate, and it's unfortunate that sometimes egos play a bigger role than what we need to address at the time. Just to let you know what Yellow Cab, and we're always moving to the future, Yellow Cab is currently changing right now our dispatch system to a state-of-the-art, first of its kind in Canada, cloud-based telephone system that will allow us to offer enhanced service to our own cabs, plus to smaller taxi companies around the province. This cloud-based phone system will enable us to take phone calls from anywhere in the province, whether it's anywhere within internet, whether it's at Starbucks or wherever it is. This, we have also approached the seniors and the disabled groups to possibly take some calls to try and enhance and improve their incomes on a monthly basis, because you know that they are capped on incomes and they can only earn so much. So many companies across North America are outsourcing their calls to the Philippines, to India. We're saying no way. We're keeping it in Vancouver for our Vancouver citizens. We respectfully request at this time that the city, mayor, council, please hold the moratorium in place until the province or the Passenger Transportation Board gives direction. We were informed yesterday at 3:30, and we were called to a meeting today for 3 o'clock, and we got the notice yesterday to meet with Minister Fassbender, Minister Stone, the Vancouver Taxi Association, the BC Taxi Association and the Victoria Taxi Association. So from this meeting, I will go to that one. So I am not sure in which direction the province is going. I don't think anyone is sure which way the province is going. They have alluded to us that they do not want to hurt the taxi industry. Mayor and council have always stood behind the Vancouver taxi industry. You've always supported our hardworking people, and we thank you for everything that you have done for us. So we respectfully request that you hold this moratorium in place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carr has some questions for you.
Yes. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Ms. Barrows, thank you so much for coming and, as usual, keeping us informed of the developments within the industry, which is very important to the residents and the people of Vancouver. My question is, the review that's going on, does it put on hold any you've got a standing application, don't you, for more cabs within the Vancouver area, especially to service some of the high demand periods like weekends? Is that the case?
That is the case. So 4 Vancouver companies have been working with ECAB, as you know. So what we have done is we had ECAB actually do an analysis for us, and I can share this with Mayor and Council, and it shows the number of dispatch trips that we've taken. It shows when we need the taxis. We don't need the taxis at 10 o'clock at night for the most part. We need the taxis at 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the afternoon to 7 o'clock in the afternoon. On a rainy day, this is when we need it. We need accessible vehicles. And more so, our standing application with passenger transportation is also to move the Vancouver industry into the limelight again by adding electric vehicles to our fleet. So we had made arrangements to work with Tesla and to put a certain number of Teslas on our fleet to attempt to pilot that project along with the accessible fleet.
Wow.
Yes.
Leading us right towards that 2050 100% renewable energy city, eh?
Yeah, we are. We're working.
So just to reiterate then, or to confirm, you've got a standing application, but the review, nothing's going to happen until this review is over. And so this moratorium is needed at this point to ensure that we get through the review with at least no contrary kinds of decisions being made. Is that
absolutely?
Okay. That's good. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Genova.
I do have some questions. Thank you very much. Regarding the new taxi licenses, I understand that there are a number of accessible cabs that can't be on the road because currently that's being held up by the Passenger Transportation Board. Could you elaborate on that?
You know, we have put in application after application after application over the last 4 years, and we've been turned down. And we can't quite figure out or determine why, because it's always been the 4 Vancouver companies that are asking for these additional licenses. So there's no one objecting to our applications except for the out of city taxis or the suburban taxi companies. We still have an application. We get turned down. We rebuild the application. We go get more support letters. The Hotel Association, I met with them. The disabled community, I've met with them. They support letters. They send them to the passenger transportation. And again, we're waiting for our application decision. We have asked for 175. And you know, the last one we asked for 75 additional accessible licenses, and we were turned down. We received 20, of which, of the 20 licenses that we did receive, we have to take off 20 vehicles. It doesn't matter what type of vehicles come off, but we have to take off 20 vehicles that operate at peak times.
So my next question is, I'm concerned, and I wonder if you share this concern or if you could comment on this, that this sends a message, a moratorium on new taxi licenses, to the Passenger Transportation Board, that right now we're waiting for 155 accessible cabs. So with sending the message that we want no new taxi licenses, it may in fact impede our ability to have more accessible cabs on the road. And that's important to me because I'm also the liaison to the Persons with Disabilities Committee, and I used to be the liaison to the Seniors Advisory Committee for Park Boards. So if you could comment on that.
I sure can. There's always been a standing order from council, mayor and council with passenger transportation, that if any accessible licenses are issued or given to the Vancouver companies, that those licenses would be allowed to be on the road and operate on the road. We've pushed very hard with that. I'm on an advisory committee right now myself with TransLink and MBT to work forward to see how we can work this through in the future. You know, it would be my hope in a few years that we'd have only accessible vehicles if they could come into some kind of, if we could get some approval through Transport Canada on the electric wheelchair accessible vehicles. You're not going to send, I do not believe you're going to be sending a message to the Passenger Transportation Board or the government that, you know, we're just going to, that you're going to stop the license issue until they make their decision or they make their determination. The government has made it quite clear that they are not going to be bullied or pushed by anybody, and that they're going to take their time making this decision, and they're going to make a right decision in their eyes, and they're going to have a BC homegrown solution. So it wouldn't matter.
No, I'm looking specifically at, I mean, the motion that we see in front of us talks about a moratorium on new taxi licenses. So I'm not considering rideshare right now.
No.
Right now, I understand that you have mentioned in your comments rideshare, and I understand how they apply. However, in looking at the moratorium on new taxi licenses, I can tell you that I myself waited quite some time, and I had a number of people just on Twitter last night tweeting at me that they had been waiting for quite some time in Vancouver for a taxi. So I think it's fantastic, because I think that our taxi, you know, business, the economy, I enjoy talking to taxi drivers when I'm in the cabs. I understand it's very busy, but this signals that we are not going to put new taxis on the road, yet we won't, you know, enforce a moratorium on marijuana until the federal government makes a decision. So why, you know, how can we do one thing in this case but something else in that case?
Councillor Genova,
Again, you don't have to answer my question.
No, I will answer your question if I may, just, and then I will answer that question.
you don't need to get into marijuana if it's not your area
I'm
of
not getting into
expertise.
that.
Yeah.
No, I'm definitely not touching that one,
You
not
might
at
have
all.
lived experience, but
We met with Minister Fassbender and Minister Stone. We put a proposal forward to them to pilot a project for about 974 days, going through the provincial election as well as the Vancouver election, so that no one was felt pushed in any shape, way, or form. No one has responded to that. That was over 9 months ago when that process was made. No one. We then said, can we have our pilot project, please? Can we put these vehicles on the road? Please, can we put these vehicles on the road? We were told at that point that it's a business decision, and the Vancouver Taxi Association has to make their own business decision with all the uncertainty of the ride sourcing in front of us. So we did make that decision and put another application in for 175, which shows an extreme amount of investment that will go into the fleet if we receive approval. We've been sitting waiting for approval and waiting for approval and waiting for approval. I'm not talking about ride sourcing either, but if ride sourcing comes in the way it has come in other jurisdictions around North America, and the investment is put out by the taxi industry, then we will be in serious trouble as well. We have to compete, and we have to compete hard, and we have to fight for the business we have, and competition is there no matter which way we look at it. But I do not believe that you are sending a message out there to government whatsoever. Basically, they have been doing the very same thing to us by refusing our applications over and over and over again. We've been here many times asking for support, and you've given it every time for new licenses.
Thank you. I'm out of time.
thanks very much. We have Don Guilbeault as our next speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today, I'm here to speak for and on behalf of the 7 suburban taxi companies that were issued licenses by the Passenger Transportation Board in the fall of 2012 to operate in the City of Vancouver during peak weekend periods. The City of Vancouver is here today to consider a motion on a further 1-year moratorium on new taxi licenses. Not surprising is that this motion is carefully worded to reference a moratorium on new taxi licenses rather than a moratorium on any additional taxi licenses. I suggest this motion is worded in such a way that any licenses issued to the Vancouver Taxi Association companies would not be considered new taxi licenses, but rather simply adding to the inventory of existing Vancouver-based taxis. I'm also here due to this motion being considered on a moratorium on taxi licensing that was originally imposed in the fall of 2014. I would like to point out, as was mentioned, that the 4 Vancouver taxi companies have applications pending as of September 7th of this year for a total of 175 additional taxi licenses, which begs the question, is the city going to include any of those licenses that may be issued by the Passenger Transportation Board in this moratorium? Please note that during the period of this moratorium, new vehicle for hire licenses have been approved for the Vancouver taxi companies and their members, and new vehicle for hire licenses were issued to Ripe Holdings Incorporated. I would invite the city to outline the purpose of the moratorium other than to prevent the operation of the 38 suburban taxis. In our view, this is another direct and intentional step by this council to preclude the suburban taxi companies from operating in the city of Vancouver. In 2014, the city of Vancouver convened a process known as the Vehicle for Hire Dialogue. There were approximately 14 meetings over a period of 8 months. And despite the unqualified recommendations from the City of Vancouver staff in October 2015, City Council ignored the staff report and recommended that the licensing of our 38 suburban taxis and further recommended that the temporary moratorium of taxi license be extended for 1 more year. So I would like to know, I'm interested to know that within the past year, what the City of Vancouver has done in respect to investigating the taxi industry and other key stakeholders since imposing this extended moratorium last fall. I would suggest, to the best of our knowledge, nothing has been done to investigate what might be in your own best interest or in the interest of the taxi service in the city. So in the interim, the availability of taxis in the City of Vancouver remains an ongoing significant problem. On January 5 of this year, His Worship Mayor Robertson directed a letter to the Minister of Transportation, the Honourable Todd Stone. And in the first paragraph, Mayor Robertson indicates that he is corresponding with regards to improving taxi service in the City of Vancouver. I believe the elephant in the room comes in the form of a bureaucratic red tape that is compromising public convenience and public safety. The City of Vancouver taxi service in the downtown Vancouver Entertainment District would be significantly enhanced by a further 38 taxis, which is exactly what the City of Vancouver staff recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. You have questions from Councillor Carr.
Yes. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for coming and speaking to us on this issue. My first question is really around sort of the economics of the industry. How important are peak hour fares to the bottom line financial viability of a cab company?
Peak hours?
Your peak hour fares. I mean, we know that taxis run 24/7, right? So how important are the peak hours to the actual profitability and getting those peak hour fares?
Well, as you indicated, we are 24/7.
Yeah.
As my colleague recommended, yes, there are times in the mornings, the afternoons, in the early afternoon, but equally the nighttime, we rely upon that business as well in order to pad the income of a driver.
Right. Okay. So it is important for the viability of any company to get those fares, right? To get to operate, to make sure that they're fully on at the peak hours.
Well, by the way that we are structured and designed, and the men that drive the taxis, they aren't employees. They don't work on first salary. Right. They work for trips. And I would suggest that every taxi is on the road during those peak hours.
Yeah.
Nobody's at home having lunch with the family.
Right. Yeah. Okay. My second question is what is the proportion of your fleet in general to you represent, you said 7 suburban taxi companies. So what proportion of the fleet is dedicated to accessible vehicles, so vehicles that are geared towards the accessibility for people with disabilities?
That's actually mandated by the Passenger Transportation Board, and it's a minimum 15% of your fleet.
15%, okay. And do you provide training to all your...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And what about the percentage of your fleet that's hybrids, for example?
Oh, with the exception of our accessible vans, 99.5%.
Okay. Okay. And what was again the number of you've applied for a certain number of licenses?
Well,
And they were for peak hours?
The test was done by the Passenger Transportation Board.
Yeah.
And the things they looked at was the ability of the 7 companies, 16 companies, no, pardon me, I think 14 companies applied to have the availability of being able to come into the city of Vancouver during peak hours on the weekends. PTB took a look at those companies. They saw that 7 of those companies had room for, and I forget the terminology, excess capacity, and that it would not be a detriment to their home business space by having those vehicles working in the city of Vancouver.
Okay. Great, thank you.
I just have one question, Mr. Gilbo. Do your firms that you represent here today, do they support the introduction of ride sharing through organizations like Uber or Lyft in the province of BC?
I'm sorry, sir.
Are your taxi companies in favor of the introduction of ride sharing through the use of services like Uber and Lyft in the province of BC?
We have been very strong advocates against such a service coming into our province. Our companies represent the BC Taxi Association. So we're representing the moms and pops that are up in Revelstoke, right down to the major players here in the Lower Mainland.
But would you agree that the province is seriously considering the introduction of ride sharing or ride sourcing, as they've renamed it, in the metro region at the very least, and also Victoria?
Well, I don't have a magic wand, but I would intimate that the motions have been put in place without further information prior to the May election. I think we may have a brighter light shone on this after the election. But I also believe that, again, as my colleague alluded to, that it's a big, big challenge because we have a provincial regulation here as opposed to municipal. And that's the challenge that I think the Ministry of Transportation and the Passenger Transportation Board has, is how to make it and continue it to be a level playing field. And I think if they do that, it's not going to be lucrative at all for rideshare companies.
But do you think it's wise for the city to wait to see what the province comes up with before it makes its own decisions? I mean, this is a huge sea change far beyond 38 suburban cabs, the possibility that there'd be the introduction of ride sourcing in major metropolitan markets. I mean, the ministers told the UBCM that that was certainly something they were looking at. Do you think it'd be wise for the city to make jumps now before we knew what the whole framework would look like?
I'll allude back to the 175 licenses that are sitting right now. Are they going to go into abatement, or is there going, you know, I'm not sure if it's your job to protect us in that manner.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I just have, unless there's further speakers, I just have a question for staff. Mr. Johnson, is there anyone else who wants to put any questions? Or Mr. Johnson, I just want to be sure that when you look at the wording of the taxi motion, is it your understanding that if there are significant developments in the provincial sphere before, sooner than 12 months, that you understand the directions to bring forward recommendations to council at that time?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to get that out there. Okay, Councillor Genova, did you want to debate the motion? Okay, go ahead.
I had a question regarding the accessible cab or the accessible taxis. I understand that Ms. Bauer had just said that there were 122 that we're still waiting on, and I understand that. I know that this is very important to the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee. It's something that they bring up at almost every meeting regarding taxi service. In fact, some of them can't get to the meetings because they're waiting for a cab or their handy darts. But I'm just wondering specifically on that, what actions is the City of Vancouver taking to make sure that we encourage the Passenger Transportation Board to grant as many accessible taxi licenses as possible?
Staff have, it's been very clear to staff of council's priority in virtually every conversation we've had with minister staff of PTB, we've indicated the importance of accessible cabs. So we'll continue to advocate for that.
Okay. Another question would just be regarding new taxi licenses. I understand that there are different policies regarding different companies. However, 15% was just mentioned by the last speaker. Is there a certain percentage that we expect or consider of new taxi licenses to be accessible?
I'm not actually recalling that fact on the top of my head. Do you know, Kay, or?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thor Coleman with Licenses and Inspections. The way accessible taxi cab licensing is set up is actually handled at the provincial level, and they set those limits out. So we don't contain anything in our policies or bylaws about setting them because they are virtually, they're carried through by the province when they issue their licenses.
Is there a follow-up to that? Is there a reason that that's not included in our policies currently as to what we would expect in the City of Vancouver?
I would say it's by virtue of the fact that they've covered it off that we don't duplicate the same provision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, I think we're ready for a vote on this. Councilor DeJova, did you want to debate it further?
Yes,
Okay.
I would.
Go for it.
First of all, if this had perhaps come as a staff recommendation,
Councilor Stevenson, could you order, please?
had this come as a staff recommendation, perhaps with a report and a proper recommendation, the way that we do see when staff bring it forward, I could support this. However, it seems very vague to me, a moratorium on new taxi licenses, and it's tied to the provincial process. So today I've heard our speakers talk about rideshare, which I don't see included in this motion. I've heard them talk about suburban taxis, which I also don't see included in this motion, and additional licenses, which I don't see included in this motion. I also see no mention of the huge issue that our city faces in having accessible taxi service, as well as taxi service for those with mobility issues. Perhaps they don't need a wheelchair accessible cab, but perhaps they do need a cab because they're a senior citizen who aren't able to make it to the bus stop or to a certain area. And being that I have been the liaison to the Seniors Advisory Committee, and I am the liaison to the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee, and I haven't had a chance to discuss this motion with them, I'm very reluctant to support it. I also see here in this motion that Councillor Meggs is asking that we wait for the completion of the provincial process. I'm very happy to see Councillor Meggs putting so much weight and faith in the province. I don't want to say I've never seen that before. I'm just saying that with marijuana, I didn't see that with the federal government. We certainly aren't waiting for them to complete their process on marijuana. Now, I'm not saying that I don't support the legalization of marijuana. I very much do. I'm not saying that I don't support the provincial process. I just feel that on one hand, we're doing one thing, and then on another hand, with taxi cabs, especially considering many of the emails we've received, especially in the holiday season, saying that people aren't able to access a taxi cab, and in that season, it's more difficult for I would say persons with disabilities or accessibility needs, because we all know that those wheelchair accessible vans also double and take able-bodied people as well. We felt that it was so important that we lifted the moratorium for the month of December. last year. So I just feel that this is flip-flopping and I won't be able to support it under principle. That being said, I very much have in past and do support our Vancouver taxi service. I know that the seniors and persons with disabilities rely on the taxi service as well as Handy Dart and other forms of accessible transportation. I appreciate the speakers who came today and the comments of Ms. Bauer to update us also on what they're doing, how they continue to fight and advocate for those accessible taxi licenses at the Passenger Transportation Board. But unfortunately, because this motion is so vague, and unfortunately because of the fact that we circumvented the federal process on marijuana and we're now into, I think we have 135 dispensaries open, I won't be able to support this motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, order, please. Councillor Carr.
I think I'll just stick to taxis. I am speaking in support of the motion, and first of all, I just want to maybe make it clear for those who might say, why isn't there a report? This is the extension of a moratorium, and when we originally voted on this motion, there was a report, there was a thorough discussion, there were speakers to it, and we reviewed all of the background information, pros and cons at that time, and if I remember correctly, very thoroughly reviewed the points to consider. The concerns haven't changed for me, concerns that have to do with a potential granting of new licenses that would be for a time period, i.e. peak weekend hours, which really are incredibly important to the financial viability and profitability of a taxi cab company. And it's of concern to me because I see investments by the Vancouver Taxi Association, considerable investments that are in line with the city's goals. One, in terms of being a city that for accessibility or of accessibility, so more taxis proportionately that are accessible for people with disabilities, and training to taxi cab drivers in that regard. And number two, the commitment to a greener fleet. And Ms. Brow just indicated to us it's going even greener with the addition in the future of actual full electric vehicles. So for those reasons, I think it's really important that we do not stop the moratorium, which if were to happen could indicate the granting of licenses, new licenses at peak hours to non-Vancouver Taxi Association companies from the suburbs, and that would I think be very much undermining the progress we're making in terms of a greener and socially responsible fleet here.
Thanks. I'll just say that Councillor Carr made some excellent points about the process we went through a year ago, which was a decision made unanimously by Council, so I'm surprised to hear the dissent today. When it comes to consultation with the Disabilities Advisory Committee, I had the privilege of serving that committee as liaison for 3 years. This was tabled at our last meeting. It wasn't tabled in the course of the package, and so my experience was that that committee would respond within about 45 minutes of an email request for feedback, and if further discussion was required, they were available for conference calls too. So perhaps there wasn't time, but generally speaking, my experience with that committee at least was very positive in terms of very quick and definitive feedback, especially on an issue as important as this. So I don't think I have anything to add except to say that I think there's a unanimous view that there needs to be a change and an improvement and an increase in the taxi and ride for hire service in the city. What we haven't been able to agree on, in spite of the roundtable the city launched, which had provincial involvement, was a direction from the province that would help us align both the PTB and the city in a way that would protect the assets we have in terms of our strong taxi industry and tap the value of new technology and the possibilities that it offers. So I hope the provincial review is shorter than we think it will be. I think Mr. Guilbeault and I are on the same page, at least on that. It sounds like it'll last until after the election, but if it comes earlier, we've heard the city manager confirm that we can respond faster, and I know there's a lot of people out there who hope that it does come faster and that we're quick to get in line with whatever changes are positive. So with that, we'll go to a voting queue. All those in favor of the motion, please show. And it passes with Councillor Genova opposed. Okay, so now we'll recess to go in camera and have a bite to eat. And I suppose at the end of that, we're done completely? Okay. But would you have to come back to adopt whatever decisions are made? I mean, I guess my question, Madam Clerk, is the bylaw that was attached here, does it have to be voted on in some? We'll go to regular council now. Okay, so we'll all do it on that. So in that case, the standing committee portion is complete, and we'll convene a regular council. Mr. Mayor. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Councillor Megg. So we'll now convene in regular council to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's Standing Committee on City Finance and Services. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Robertson is in the chair. Councillor Louise on a leave of absence. Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Deal. Councillor Jang. Here. Councillor Reimer. Councillor Meggs.
Here.
Councillor Ball is on a leave of absence. Councillor Carr. Here. Councillor Affleck is on a leave of absence, and Councillor DeGenova. You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We need a motion to adopt the Standing Committee recommendations. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries unanimously. We have a bylaw on the agenda for consideration related to item 6, the taxi licensing motion. Would someone like to move adoption of that bylaw? Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. And that means that a bylaw to amend vehicles for hire bylaw number 6066 regarding licenses for taxi cabs and dual taxi cabs is approved. And we need a motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. This meeting